Welcome to our channel, where we explore stories from around the world that often go unnoticed. Today, I'll share a compelling tale about a family whose journey reflects hope and resilience, contrasting sharply with the tragic endings often associated with love stories. The story begins in Missouri, where Michael and Catherine met during their school years. As classmates, Michael was drawn to Catherine's bright blonde hair and warm personality. He sought her attention through small gestures, helping with homework and inviting her for walks, gradually building a close friendship filled with shared secrets and learning. Over time, their bond deepened into love, culminating in a heartfelt proposal. Their wedding was a beautiful celebration, marking the start of a lifelong commitment to cherish each other through all circumstances. A decade later, the family moved to Lidditz, Pennsylvania, a town founded in 1756 by members of the Moravian Church. This peaceful community, inhabited by descendants of Moravian settlers, was known for its quiet, simple lifestyle. Many families sought refuge here from the chaos of modern life, valuing a life free from excessive technology and worldly distractions. The Bordons, deeply religious and devoted, found this environment ideal for raising their children. Life in Lidditz was serene, with each day blending seamlessly into the next. The Bordons cherished their solitude and spiritual connection, aligning their lives with their faith. Michael actively participated in the local church, teaching Sunday school, while Catherine managed their household and supported her husband's community work. Their focus was on spiritual fulfillment rather than material wealth, with Michael working as a manager at a printing company to provide for their family. Over the years, they had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls, joining many other large families in the town, some with more than 5 children. These families often gathered for religious events and community celebrations, fostering close-knit bonds. The Bordons' family life was centered on faith, community, and the hope of shielding their children from the hardships of the wider world. Their story exemplifies a life built on devotion, simplicity, and shared values, standing as a testament to the enduring power of love and faith in shaping a resilient family. Growing up in a strict environment in the early 2000s, the eldest sons of the family had long since left home to attend university in a different city, leaving behind 3 younger children. These children continued their homeschooling, much to their parents' satisfaction, and were admired by neighbors and friends for their well-rounded personalities and varied interests. Cara, Caitlin, and Daniel were seen as kind, attentive, and exemplary, reflecting the values their parents cherished. However, as Cara entered her teenage years, her behavior began to challenge the family's traditional expectations, causing upheaval. Despite her father's strict rules, she started playing on a local soccer team, sneaking out to discos and engaging in activities she had previously been forbidden. Her changing attitude deeply unsettled her father, who believed that hours of conversations and instructions would steer her back onto the right path. Yet, her rebellious spirit persisted, and conflicts between them intensified. Cara openly showed interest in young men and sought relationships, which her parents found difficult to accept. In 2005, when Cara was just 14, she met David, an 18-year-old from a support group for homeschooled students. Their shared passions and mutual curiosity quickly drew them together, and they formed a close, secret bond. They created social media profiles to communicate privately, exchanging heartfelt messages that they carefully kept hidden from their parents. As their correspondence grew more emotional and frequent, words alone no longer sufficed, and they began meeting in secluded spots around the city. What started as innocent walks soon evolved into romantic encounters. They would escape at night to discos and spend hours together, often until dawn. David, having experienced his first love and its disappointments, was more mature, while Cara, still young and full of bright feelings, seemed to soar with happiness whenever they were together. Her joy was so evident that she appeared to fly, her radiant smile never leaving her face. Meeting David seemed to restore her obedience at home, and her father, believing her teenage struggles were behind her, was overjoyed. Yet beneath this happiness, Cara's inner fire remained smoldering. She knew her parents' strict views on love and relationships, which had been ingrained in her since childhood, and she feared their reaction. She tried to keep her feelings hidden, guarding her secret with her boyfriend, but secrets, as always, tend to surface. Eventually, Cara confided in her sister, showing her a photo of David and describing their relationship, their love, and their plans to run away together. Her sister, worried for her, told their mother, and the truth was soon uncovered. One early morning, Cara slipped into the house through her window, quietly making her way to her room, her heart pounding with excitement after another date. But her happiness was short-lived. Her mother was waiting there, sitting quietly on her bed. The realization dawned instantly, and words were unnecessary. After breakfast, her parents had a serious conversation, forbidding her from seeing David again. Having shielded their children from violence, substance abuse, and other dangers, they were shocked and disappointed by her actions. Her father, overwhelmed by frustration and concern, forbade her from leaving her room that night. Cara, feeling both hurt and trapped, spent the evening at David's house, longing for the freedom she once took for granted. A young man dropped his beloved off near her home, and they agreed that once Cara was safely inside, she would send him a message. However, that message never arrived. Concerned, David called her repeatedly and sent messages on social media, but still received no reply. About an hour later, Cara finally informed him she had been caught and asked him to come over so her parents could speak with him. When David arrived, Cara's father expressed strong disapproval and forbade him from seeing his daughter again. His family held very traditional views, firmly opposed to relationships at such a young age. Words of affection failed to sway the father's stance. He warned David that if he saw him with Cara again, he would report him to the authorities for involvement with a minor. The intense emotional discussion ended with Cara being locked in her room once more, and David leaving empty-handed. Heartbroken, David drove away in his old car, tears welling up, perhaps from first-time feelings of love or from the pain of being dismissed. The separation was painfully difficult for both. They struggled through long days apart, unable to endure the distance. To stay close, they devised a plan to deceive everyone by pretending to accept Cara's father's conditions. They would act as if they had broken up, while secretly continuing their relationship. In public and at church, they played the part of former lovers, avoiding each other's gaze. Their parents, convinced they had protected their daughter from a youthful mistake, believed the ruse. Meanwhile, David missed Cara terribly. In the evenings he read Shakespeare, imagining serenading her like Romeo, even as their family's feud kept them apart. Yet despite their love, reconciliation and parental blessing remained out of reach. Determined, David decided to take a bold step. He called Cara's home and requested a meeting with her father to discuss their future marriage, set for November 13th, 2005. When David arrived at the Bordón residence, he openly declared his love for Cara and spoke of their plans to marry. His father, Michael, responded dismissively, asserting that such a union would never happen. Anticipating rejection, David, overwhelmed with emotion, drew a firearm and shot Michael in the back as he approached the front door. He then turned his violence on Cara's mother, Catherine, shooting her as she sat nearby. Afterward, David searched the house, calling for Cara, but couldn't find her. Frightened and desperate, he got into his car and started to drive away. Suddenly, he saw Cara running toward him. She jumped into the vehicle and pleaded with him to go as far as possible, to marry and begin a new life elsewhere. The young couple fled the city in the boy's red car. But why would a 14-year-old girl run away with a young man who had just committed such violence? Was she not shocked or overwhelmed by the brutality she had witnessed? Both were once considered well-behaved children, yet they eventually became involved in criminal acts. Cara Bordón was reported missing for 24 hours after her parents, Michael and Catherine Bordón, were found deceased. Surveillance footage revealed that Cara had not resisted but had willingly accompanied David. As a result, charges of abduction against David were dropped. Authorities across Pennsylvania and Indiana issued alerts as they investigated sightings of the couple traveling westward in a red Volkswagen Jetta. One tip led police to a truck stop outside Fort Wayne on Monday morning where the vehicle was seen parked. When officers arrived, the car was gone, prompting state police to be alerted. Around noon, patrols spotted the vehicle on Interstate 70 in Belleville. David Ludwig, driving at speeds between 95 and 100 miles per hour, led officers on a dangerous 5-mile chase along the highway. State Trooper David Cox described Ludwig as extremely reckless, causing multiple accidents in a manner reminiscent of an action film. The pursuit ended with the teenage fugitives being captured, making national headlines. Television coverage showed their arrest after Ludwig had killed his girlfriend's parents and taken her with him. The couple's plan was to escape far away, marry, and start anew. The district attorney announced that the initial abduction charges against Ludwig would be dropped, but charges related to the deaths of Michael and Catherine Bordón would stand. Ludwig and Cara had fled together and remained on the run for about 28 hours before being apprehended in Indiana. Cara was released into the care of relatives and church members as she was not charged with any crime. Ludwig was detained without bail on charges of causing deaths and abduction. He was extradited back to Pennsylvania on November 14, 2005, after waiving extradition. During the arrest, no weapons were found in his vehicle, but authorities discovered 54 firearms at his home, belonging to his father, a hunter who had taught him how to handle guns. An 18-minute video from Ludwig's laptop showed him discussing plans for an armed invasion of another family's home, though the plan was abandoned due to too many cars present. The police classified Cara as a victim in the case, yet Ludwig claimed that surveillance footage from stores along their route would prove she was not abducted. Ludwig did not resist efforts to return him to Pennsylvania, where a judge ordered him held without bail. He was not represented by an attorney during the initial proceedings, and a preliminary hearing was scheduled for November 23rd. The trial for the young man responsible for killing 2 adults in front of their children was brief. Court documents revealed that Cara's 13-year-old sister, Caitlin, testified that her parents were shot after arguing with Ludwig for about an hour. She saw Ludwig shoot her father, then ran to the bathroom, where she heard a second shot, likely the one that killed her mother. Ludwig then called out for Cara, while the couple's 9-year-old son ran to neighbors, who called emergency services. In June of 2006, Ludwig entered a plea agreement with the district attorney, who had sought the death penalty. Ludwig pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and other charges, resulting in an immediate sentence of 2 consecutive life terms. Since 2006, Cara Bordón has been under guardianship, represented by legal counsel, following a series of complex events. In a court hearing held on November 22, 2005, the charges of abduction against David G. Ludwig were dismissed. The court determined that Cara voluntarily left with Ludwig, with no evidence of coercion, and surveillance footage showed she had multiple opportunities to escape. Cara herself admitted she chased after Ludwig when he left her home, driven by her desire to marry him. Recognized as a victim in this tragic situation, she faced no criminal charges as her cooperation during investigations and the digital trail of emails, blogs, and texts played a role in the decision. During a somber memorial service at Lancaster Bible College, Cara, surrounded by her siblings, mourned her parents' loss. The local community expressed its respect by decorating mailboxes with white ribbons, honoring the family's memory. The tragedy left 5 children without their parents' guidance and love. George Landis, an elder from the local chapel, reflected that such loss is ultimately in God's hands, offering reassurance that Mike and Katie are now in a better place. Vera Zimmerman, 50, who knew the Bordón family and Ludwig's mother for 7 years, commented on the children's upbringing, noting that a lapse in judgment contributed to these events. Friends and neighbors remembered Cara as a cheerful, sociable girl, known for babysitting and her passion for soccer. Kevin Etchelman, an executive pastor at Arada Community Church, highlighted her active participation in youth activities. However, Zimmerman pointed out that there were underlying tensions with her parents, especially concerning her interest in boys. Samuel P. Lohr, a friend of Ludwig, revealed that the two had a secret romantic relationship characterized by flirtatious messages and inappropriate images exchanged online. Legal documents indicated that Cara's parents responded by disconnecting her internet service, showing their disapproval. The peaceful town was deeply shaken by the tragic events, which drew attention beyond the local community, especially among homeschooling circles. Friends struggled to understand how sheltered children could commit such serious acts. Despite their relationship, Cara and Ludwig were not officially recognized as a couple due to parental disapproval. Stephanie Mammon, a 16-year-old neighbor, reflected on how David Ludwig, faced with familial opposition, resorted to violence. Ludwig's appeal for release was denied by the state appellate court, as announced by the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office. Following his sentencing on June 20th, Ludwig was evaluated at Tamp Hill before being transferred to a state prison in Indiana County to begin serving a life sentence for the murders. On August 3rd, Ludwig, age 19, was moved to the State Correctional Institution at Pine Grove, as announced by Susan Norton, spokesperson for the State Department of Corrections. The facility was chosen because of its specialized program for young offenders aged 15 to 20, aimed at fostering responsibility, discipline, respect, and self-worth. Opened in 2000, Pine Grove houses some of the most challenging young inmates in a therapeutic community setting, with daily routines starting early in the morning. At 6:30 in the morning, inmates gather for a roll call before beginning their daily workout, which includes squats, push-ups, and jogging in place. By 7:15, they return to their cells to prepare for breakfast, served at 7:30. The day continues with a schedule that features lunch at 11:30 and dinner at 4:20 in the afternoon. The majority of their time is dedicated to educational programs, totaling 4 hours daily, covering subjects such as culinary arts, business computer skills, drafting, and heating and cooling system installation, along with building maintenance. Additionally, inmates participate in another 4 hours of personal development classes focused on life management skills. A significant part of the routine is the 90-day military-style leadership development program, which emphasizes core values like honor, discipline, honesty, and respect. Transitioning from the county jail, where Ludwig earned his high school diploma, to the state correctional facility posed a challenge for the young man. According to Merrill M. Spann, one of Ludwig's attorneys, the move was difficult because the county jail was smaller and more familiar to him. Ludwig will now be among the general population and will have visitors. The cost of housing an inmate at Pine Grove, a facility employing around 430 staff members, is roughly $120 daily. Ludwig will be assigned tasks such as janitorial work or food service and will participate in daily recreational and educational activities. Inmates at Pine Grove, numbering about 250, can earn wages ranging from 18 cents to 42 cents per hour working as carpenters, plumbers, cooks, or laborers. The money earned can be used to buy clothing, footwear, food, and personal items at the prison's commissary. Most inmates at Pine Grove remain until they turn 22, after which they are transferred to adult prisons to serve the remainder of their sentences. David Ludwig, now 37, is serving 2 consecutive life sentences for the shooting deaths of Michael and Catherine Bordón in their home in November of 2005. The victims had told him he could no longer see their 14-year-old daughter, Cara Bordón. In his latest legal petition, Ludwig raised issues including alleged mistreatment as a juvenile offender serving a life sentence. He cited a 2012 Supreme Court ruling that declared life imprisonment for juvenile offenders unconstitutional. However, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court recently rejected his appeal, agreeing with Lancaster County Judge David Ashworth, who had previously deemed the challenge untimely and without merit. According to the county prosecutor's office, Ludwig does not qualify for the same considerations as minors because he was 18 and a half at the time of the crimes. Ludwig is currently incarcerated in Lancaster County. Meanwhile, Cara Beth Bordón, the 14-year-old girlfriend of Ludwig, who was accused of killing her parents and fleeing with him to Indiana, has reunited with her family in Pennsylvania. As CBS News correspondent Sharon Aloni reports, authorities now consider Cara a victim, and she has not been detained, leaving open the possibility that she may have played a significant role in the events. At just 14 years old, she faced serious questions about her involvement with Ludwig, raising concerns about potential legal charges. Warwick's police chief, Richard F. Glay Jr., expressed his distress, noting how upset she was, crying as the reality of the situation sank in. It's easy to forget that she was only a child, devastated by events that shattered the sense of safety within their community. A neighbor involved in the memorial service described the victims as wonderful people, emphasizing how deeply their loss would be felt. The situation was described as utter chaos by G. Gary Kerner, the Lancaster County coroner, who remarked that this was far from a tragic romance like Romeo and Juliet. It was something much darker. A reckless act born out of fury and desperation had claimed 3 lives, yet only 2 individuals faced the consequences. David Ludwig, who was sentenced to spend his entire life in prison, never to make independent choices again. But the question remains, does such a fate truly constitute living? The community struggled to comprehend how such bright, promising children could commit such heinous acts. Despite homeschooling and religious upbringing, this tragedy unfolded. Perhaps the parents, trusting in their faith, overlooked critical aspects of their children's development. Maybe they failed to communicate openly or to recognize their daughter's secret pursuits and desire for new experiences. It might have been better to allow children more freedom, sharing their own youthful memories rather than imposing strict restrictions. In the end, parental decisions often lead to disappointment, and we can only speculate on what might have prevented this catastrophe. What is clear is that violence breeds more violence. When society normalizes aggression, we become desensitized, accepting it as part of daily life. The more we practice violence, the more ingrained it becomes as a problem-solving tool. Sadly, this acceptance can even seep into Christian households, contradicting the core teachings of compassion and love. Statistics show that violence can be perpetuated across generations. For instance, Michael Madison, born on October 15th in Cleveland, Ohio in 1977, exemplifies how cycles of neglect and abuse can lead to tragic outcomes. His parents, Diane Madison and John Baldwin, had an unplanned pregnancy, and their relationship was strained from the start. Baldwin abandoned Diane, denying paternity, leaving her to raise Michael alone. Diane's own childhood was marred by neglect, as her mother was a heroin addict and sex worker, which left her ill-prepared for motherhood. Growing up in an environment of instability and hardship, Diane struggled to provide a stable upbringing for her son. Social workers later intervened, but the scars of neglect and chaos persisted, illustrating how early life circumstances can influence future tragedies. Michael's early life was marked by relentless abuse and neglect. His mother, Diane, often allowed her boyfriends to discipline him harshly. When Michael was just 2 years old, Diane forcefully forced food into his mouth, causing him to vomit uncontrollably. In her frustration, she immersed him in hot water, which only intensified his distress. Afterwards, she removed him from the bath and physically assaulted him with an extension cord. A year later, another of her partners beat Michael so severely that he vomited and required hospitalization. Yet another incident left him deaf in one ear after a brutal attack by yet another boyfriend. As years passed, Michael's suffering continued. He was frequently hospitalized for dehydration and injuries, with social workers noting that he and his half-brother were often covered in scratches and bruises. Before reaching high school, Michael was already familiar to law enforcement, having been involved in minor legal issues, including an incident of inappropriate contact with a peer. His juvenile offenses were relatively minor compared to the crimes he would commit later in life. In July of 2013, Angela Deskins, a 38-year-old woman, was reported missing by her family after not being seen since June. Her body was eventually found wrapped in electrical cords with a belt around her neck. That same year, in September, Shad Shah Shili, 28, was reported missing after failing to visit her mother. Her body was discovered in July, concealed inside a plastic bag. Also in July, 18-year-old Chirella Terry vanished. her remains found inside a black trash bag. Neighbors of Michael reported a disturbing odor emanating from a garage near his apartment. During the police investigation, they uncovered the decomposing remains of a woman inside the garage. Further searches in nearby vacant homes and yards revealed 2 additional bodies, each wrapped in plastic and located roughly 200 yards apart. Authorities obtained a warrant to search Michael's residence, where they found more evidence of decomposition. Eventually, law enforcement tracked Michael to his mother's house. When they arrived, he refused to surrender, leading to a standoff that lasted several hours as they attempted to apprehend him. On a tense standoff with law enforcement, he eventually surrendered and was taken into custody. Throughout the trial, Michael showed no remorse towards the families of his victims. Instead, he laughed, smiled, and taunted them. During the victim impact statement delivered by Sherella Terry's father, Michael's unflinching smile only intensified the father's distress, prompting him to attempt an attack, which was swiftly thwarted. Despite the chaos, Michael maintained his composure, never ceasing to smile. After less than a day of deliberation, the jury convicted Michael Madison on all counts: 3 murders, 3 kidnapping charges, 3 counts of disturbing a corpse, 1 of sexual assault, and 1 of weapons possession by a former offender. On May 20th of 2016, he was sentenced to death, a verdict he later sought to challenge through an appeal. Ultimately, on July 21st, 2020, the Ohio Supreme Court unanimously upheld his sentence. Meanwhile, the story of Ronald O'Brien serves as a stark reminder of childhood innocence betrayed. From a young age, children are warned against accepting treats from strangers, a rule diligently enforced by vigilant parents. Yet, on Halloween night, many children venture out, trusting in the tradition of collecting sweets. Unfortunately, this night can sometimes turn tragic when malicious individuals exploit the occasion. In 1974, in Pasadena, Texas, a young boy named Timothy O'Brien fell gravely ill after consuming candy from his Halloween bag. His father, concerned and attentive, stayed by his side as Timothy, only 8 years old, suffered convulsions. That night, he passed away en route to the hospital. An autopsy revealed that Timothy had ingested enough potassium cyanide to kill 2 adults, indicating deliberate tampering. Investigators quickly suspected that someone in the neighborhood had maliciously laced candies with poison and was distributing them to children at random. With no clear suspects and scant evidence, law enforcement theorized that an individual harboring deep resentment towards society might have targeted innocent children as a form of retribution. The scope of the danger was uncertain, as authorities feared that other children might have also received contaminated sweets. Despite efforts to contain the threat, such as issuing a nationwide alert urging parents to bring Halloween treats to the police for inspection, the risk persisted. The investigation was complicated further by adverse weather conditions, but the determination to find the culprit remained strong. On the evening of Halloween, the limited number of houses visited by Timothy and his sister Elizabeth was overshadowed by a crucial discovery. A detailed chemical analysis of the boys' piggy bank revealed the presence of poison. Investigators identified that the lethal substance was contained within the sweet and sour powder of straw-shaped pixie sticks, a popular treat among children. After interviewing residents from the homes where the O'Brien children had obtained candy, detectives were confident that none of those households had handed out pixie sticks. However, during these interviews, they learned that someone had witnessed the distribution of that particular treat, and that individual was Timothy's father, Ronald O'Brien. When questioned, O'Brien claimed that a stranger had emerged from a dark house and handed him several of these pixie sticks to distribute to children. He added that after giving Timothy a small piece of the sugary treat, his son had complained that it tasted strange. Instead of advising him to discard the candy, O'Brien said he had given Timothy a soft drink to help wash down the powder. To aid the investigation, he provided the address where the exchange took place. The police then spoke with the man O'Brien described, a man named Courtney Melvin, who was an air traffic controller. Melvin insisted he had an alibi, stating he had been at work during the time of the incident and had not returned home until well after midnight. His employer confirmed his story, and an impressive number of his colleagues, around 200, came forward to vouch for his integrity. It became clear that Melvin was not involved in the crime, a realization that Ronald O'Brien had perhaps suspected all along. Further investigation into O'Brien's background revealed a man who was far from the respectable professional image he projected. Once trained as an optician, he struggled to hold steady employment and was drowning in debt. His history included multiple accusations of theft from former employers, suggesting a pattern of shiftlessness and dishonesty. Yet what truly raised suspicion was his financial behavior surrounding his children's deaths. O'Brien had taken out not one but 3 substantial life insurance policies on Timothy in the months before his son's untimely passing. The most damning evidence surfaced when it was discovered that O'Brien had contacted the insurance company the morning after Timothy's death, inquiring about the payout. As the boy's body lay in the morgue, his father's primary concern was how quickly the money would be paid out. Less than a week after Timothy was poisoned, on November 5th, 1974, Ronald O'Brien was arrested and formally charged with 1 count of a serious crime. Ronald O'Brien, accused of multiple charges, including murder and attempted murder, maintained a steadfast denial throughout his trial, insisting he was innocent despite overwhelming evidence. Witnesses testified that in the months before his son's death, O'Brien had become obsessed with cyanide's properties, often asking friends and family if they knew where to buy the deadly substance or how much was needed to cause death. In June of 1975, 8 months after his young son Timothy was laid to rest, O'Brien was convicted of his murder. He was also found responsible for the attempted poisonings of 4 other children, none of whom had ingested the poison. Dubbed the Candyman by the press, he faced the death penalty, initially by electric chair, but later his sentence was commuted to lethal injection as more humane methods became available. The jury took just over an hour to decide his fate, ending a case that had shocked the community with its cruelty. After the verdict, a long wait ensued, more than 9 years before O'Brien faced the consequences of his actions. During his time on death row, he was despised by fellow inmates who considered him worse than the most notorious offenders. Their hatred was so intense that they held a celebration on the day of his execution, signaling that he would be remembered as a child killer who had betrayed the trust of a young boy. On March 31st, 1984, at the age of 39, O'Brien was executed. When asked if he had any final words, he used the moment to criticize the justice system that had brought him to that point. As his death was announced over the prison loudspeaker, hundreds gathered outside, cheered, shouting "trick or treat," and tossing candy in memory of Timothy, the boy who paid the ultimate price for his father's greed. Meanwhile, in Forest Park near Portland, Oregon, the bodies of 3 women were discovered within a month, all within the same stretch of woodland. Police quickly identified a suspect, but questions remained. Was he responsible for more than the 3 murders for which he was convicted? 32-year-old Todd Allen Reed was already a registered sex offender when he murdered at least 3 women, their bodies found in the wooded area. Between 1992 and 1995, Reed had served just over 2 years of a 12-year sentence for the sexual assault of Shelley Harding, who was 7 months pregnant at the time. Harding had been walking home from work when Reed approached her with a knife, forced her into his car, and attacked her in a cowardly assault. Reed became involved in an incident that led him to flee the scene of a minor collision with another vehicle. On his way to a remote location, he assaulted Shelley, and after overpowering her, he attempted to strangle her using a seatbelt. Despite the danger, Shelley remained composed and resilient. She engaged Reed in conversation, almost as if she were trying to build rapport, all the while deliberately touching surfaces to leave as much physical evidence as possible. Her goal was to make it difficult for him to escape accountability, regardless of what he intended to do next. When Reed broke down emotionally, Shelley seized the opportunity, pleading for her release and promising she wouldn't tell anyone. Her pleas worked, and Reed let her go. Following her escape, Shelley reported her abduction and assault, and the 2 men in the vehicle Reed had collided with also came forward, reporting the hit and run. They even provided Reed's license plate number. Facing these charges, Reed pleaded no contest and received a sentence of 12 years. He was registered as a sex offender, and crucially, his DNA was collected and stored in the state crime laboratory. This evidence would later become vital in identifying the Forest Park serial killer. 7 years later, Reed was released early, having earned credits for good behavior and other factors. Forest Park, covering roughly 8 million acres and comprising over 5,000 acres of dense woodland, is one of the largest urban forest reserves in the United States, ranked 19th nationwide. Its extensive network of trails, about 70 miles long, makes it easy to get lost in its thick vegetation once you stray from the main paths. In DVE Tisiachi Chetira, a couple living off-grid in the park's remote areas was discovered to have been there undetected for 4 years. On May 7th, Odna Tisiacha deviat sot devianosto deviad, a pair walking their dog along one of the more isolated trails, found the body of 28-year-old Wella Mare. She was naked, face down, tangled in blackberry brambles, and had been strangled. Evidence suggested her body had been there for approximately 2 months. Nearby, police recovered a used condom just 28 feet from her remains, which allowed them to extract DNA crucial to their investigation. The following day, May 8th, authorities found a second victim, 26-year-old Stephanie Lynn Mosul, about a quarter of a mile from Wella's location. She was also naked and had been strangled, with her body believed to have been left there less than a week earlier. DNA traces found on her thighs further linked her to the killer. Later, a group of hikers discovered the third victim, 18-year-old Alexandria Eisen, on June 2nd. She had been reported missing in May, and her body was found at the bottom of a steep slope just off a trail. Like the others, she was naked and had been strangled, her remains lying in the remote, difficult-to-access area, just a mile from Lila and Stephanie's residence. After the discovery of Alexandria's body, Police Chief Charles admitted that investigators had identified a pattern linking the crimes. They believed they were dealing with a serial offender, as all 3 victims shared striking physical similarities and had comparable life histories. At the time of their deaths, each woman was homeless and battling substance dependencies. Notably, Stephanie had recently completed a detox program, while Lila and Alexandria had previously engaged in sex work to support their addictions. All 3 women were known to frequent West Burnside Street, a detail that helped shape the investigation. Although it remains unconfirmed whether Lila and Stephanie knew each other, authorities established that the murders occurred elsewhere, with the bodies later transported to Forest Park. Toxicology reports revealed heroin use shortly before their deaths, indicating drug involvement in their final moments. The police response was swift and highly coordinated. A specialized team of 16 officers was assembled to pursue leads, focusing on outreach in local bars and offering community protection. During the investigation, 30 additional beds were arranged for homeless women, aiming to provide shelter and safety. Despite community frustration over limited information, law enforcement kept details confidential to preserve the integrity of their efforts. They leveraged the victims' physical similarities to their advantage, deploying a female officer resembling the victims to pose as a prostitute on West Burnside Street. This undercover operation successfully attracted the suspect, who took the bait on July 7th, the same day a vigil was held for the victims. The undercover officer's suspicions grew quickly when the suspect's behavior raised alarms. Around Piat 20 a.m., he was approached by Sergeant John Botchlet Gregg, who recognized him as a sex offender and conducted a search of his vehicle. The search yielded an unused condom, a book titled Asterisk, The Killing Gift, about a woman who can kill men with her gaze, and some yellow strapping. No incriminating evidence was found, and the suspect was released. However, further investigation revealed a different story. Detective Sergeant Dave Schlagel identified him from a Adna Tisiaka Deviatsat Devianosto DVA sexual assault case where he had been the arresting officer. Consequently, police initiated Vadsat Shatir hour surveillance, monitoring his movements at home and work. During this surveillance, authorities observed him driving in circles around West Burnside and Sandy Boulevard. Laboratory analysis confirmed that DNA from the condom recovered at the crime scene and on Stephanie's thighs matched the DNA profile on file for Todd Allen Reed. This crucial evidence was obtained around 7:30 in the evening, bringing the investigation closer to identifying the perpetrator. On July 18th, after Reed had left for work, police executed a search warrant at his residence, where he lived with his girlfriend. Once the officers departed, she called him to inform him of their visit. That evening, Reed attempted to evade authorities during his shift, but it was too late. Law enforcement had already arrived by 11:30 p.m. on that same day. Just over a week earlier, police had questioned him, and only a month and a half after establishing a specialized task force, Reed was arrested outside the warehouse of Ranella Produce, where he worked night shifts unloading trucks. On July 27th, he was formally charged with 7 crimes linked to 3 murders. It later emerged that Reed, who had been ordered to serve 8 years under post-release supervision, had been removed from a sex offender treatment program 2 weeks prior to his arrest for failure to attend. In 2001, he pleaded guilty and received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Although he had faced the death penalty, his plea deal eliminated that possibility. Reed is also the primary suspect in 2, possibly 3, other unresolved cases in the Portland area. The Odnatisiacha Deviatsot Vosem Desiat Sem cold case murders of 15-year-old Jennifer Lyncher and 12-year-old Mendy Colleen Thomas, as well as the Odnatisiacha Deviatsot Devianosto Deviat disappearance of 19-year-old Amava Signs. Regarding the murders, Gresham Police Sergeant David Lerwick stated that while they suspected Reed was responsible for killing both girls, insufficient evidence prevented a conviction. Jennifer went missing on July 3, 1987, and her skeletal remains were found nearly a year later on July 8, 1988. Mendy disappeared from her apartment complex on August 3, 1987, and her body was discovered on October 4th of the same year. Both victims had been strangled and discarded in wooded areas on Gresham's eastern outskirts, about 3 miles apart. They were last seen with Gail Bennett, Reed's then-girlfriend and later wife, who married him in 1988 and divorced in 1997. Bennett, who also has a police record, might hold information about the killings but has refused to cooperate. She denied any knowledge of the crimes. At the time, police believed a single perpetrator, known to them, was responsible, and Reed was questioned due to his association with Gail. However, he was never charged or arrested in connection with these cases. After Reed's arrest in Portland, authorities renewed efforts to solve the Gresham murders, but DNA comparisons between the old evidence and Reed's genetic profile have been inconclusive. Reed is also linked to the 1999 disappearance of Amava Signs, a young woman working as a prostitute at the time. She was last seen on June 30th, 1999, and her whereabouts remain unknown. It has been suggested that Reed may have been involved, but no charges have been filed in her case. As of June of 2020, Reed's current incarceration status is unclear. By June of 2021, he was no longer listed as an inmate and may have passed away. Decades ago, a teenage girl was found beaten to death in a New Jersey cemetery. Her face was so severely injured that her identity could not be determined at the time. The public dubbed her Princess Doe, and her case became a national mystery. For 40 years, her true name remained unknown until recent developments shed light on her identity. Welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today I will tell you the story of how Princess Doe was murdered, how her identity was uncovered, and how her killer was ultimately apprehended. Princess Doe was an unidentified American teenager from West Babylon, New York. She was discovered in Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey, on July 15, 1982. Her face had been so badly battered that recognition was impossible. Her case drew widespread media attention, captivating the public's interest in solving her story. She became the first unidentified victim to be entered into the National Crime Information Center database. On the morning of that July 15th, around 8 o'clock, authorities began their investigation, aiming to bring closure to her tragic story. In the early months of 1983, gravedigger George K.E. discovered the remains of a young girl in the rear section of Cedar Ridge Cemetery, located in Blairstown, New Jersey. Her body was found lying on her back just beyond a steep embankment that led down to a creek. The victim's face had been severely battered, rendering her features unrecognizable, and due to advanced decomposition, even her eye color could not be confirmed. She was dressed in a red short-sleeved shirt and a peasant-style skirt that was found draped over her legs. No footwear or undergarments were present, and the extent of her decay made it difficult to determine additional details. A gold cross necklace was tangled in her hair, and 2 earrings were recovered from her left ear. Only her right hand bore traces of red nail polish. The condition of the remains prevented identification of any surgical scars, distinctive birthmarks, tattoos, or marks on her head or face. Forensic experts concluded that she was not pregnant and had likely never given birth. They estimated her age to be between 14 and 18 years old at the time of her passing. Toxicology tests showed no evidence of drug use, though the results were inconclusive due to the elapsed time since death. It is believed that her body was exposed to the elements for 2 to 3 days, or possibly even weeks, with the hot and humid weather complicating the assessment of decomposition timing. The forensic examination suggested she had tried to defend herself, as injuries consistent with a struggle to her hands and arms were observed. Her remains were interred in Cedar Ridge Cemetery, not far from where she was found. In January of 1983, funds were allocated for her burial, and a headstone was erected bearing the inscription, "Princess Doe, missing from home, dead among strangers, remembered by all." For many years, she was thought to be Dion Janisky, a teenager from San Jose, California, who had disappeared on July 30th, 1979. This theory gained traction among some law enforcement officials in New Jersey, who even held a press conference suggesting her identity. However, Lieutenant Eric C.R., the original lead investigator on the Princess Doe case, maintained that Diane Guy was unlikely to be the girl. Her family and investigators in California shared this view, expressing frustration over the misidentification. In 2003, DNA analysis comparing Princess Doe's genetic material with a sample from Diane's mother, Patricia, definitively proved that she was not Diane Guy. Witnesses also recalled seeing a girl matching Princess Doe's clothing purchasing cigarettes on July, though the details of this sighting remain limited. On October 13th, Adna Tisiacha deviatsot vosem desiat dvie, just 2 days prior to her remains being uncovered, Latimer recounted that she had been shopping with her daughter at a supermarket opposite the local cemetery. She was able to describe the victim's clothing, including her shirt and skirt, which were traced back to a manufacturer in the American Midwest. However, the labels on the garments had been removed. Several individuals later reported that they had purchased similar outfits at a now-closed store in Long Island. On September 22, 1999, the remains of what became known as Princess Doe were exhumed from Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown to obtain DNA samples. The body was reinterred at the same site. Following the release of a composite image of the victim in 2012, new tips emerged as the likeness resembled several missing girls from across the country. One theory suggested that Princess Doe might have been a runaway or someone using false identities while working at a hotel in Ocean City, Maryland. In 2012, investigators analyzed hair and tooth samples through isotope testing, indicating she was likely born in the United States, possibly between 7 and 10 months prior, with origins in the Midwest or Northeast. The tooth analysis pointed toward Arizona as a possible birthplace. It was also believed she had spent considerable time in Long Island, New York. Lieutenant Cram, now retired, who had been the lead investigator early in the case, coined the name Princess Doe and successfully brought widespread media attention to the story. The case prompted the inclusion of unidentified crime victims into the national database maintained by the FBI. Following extensive media coverage in 1982, Lieutenant Cram was approached by HBO to document the case in a forthcoming program titled Missing. He agreed, and filming took place over several weeks, capturing leads as they developed. The documentary featured footage of Princess Doe's recovery and her funeral in 1983, as well as the investigation process. In 2012, the case was also highlighted on America's Most Wanted, aiming to elicit new information. That same year, a recent reconstruction was broadcast on CNN on July 15th. A memorial service commemorating the 30th anniversary of Princess Doe's discovery was held at the site where her remains were found, drawing over 100 attendees, including reporters and camera crews. Her clothing and photo reconstructions were displayed publicly. On October 12, 2014, Princess Doe was honored at a local missing persons rally. Between her initial discovery and eventual identification, several theories arose. One prominent hypothesis was that Princess Doe was actually a girl named Di, who had gone missing from California, a theory that was later confirmed. The case of Princess Doe has long been shrouded in mystery, with numerous theories proposed over the years. Initially, some suspected her killer was already behind bars for another crime. For example, a man named John Reese was briefly considered, as he had been convicted of murdering a woman in nearby Bettyer, New Jersey. However, there was no concrete evidence linking him to Princess Doe's case. Another hypothesis suggested she might have been a runaway, known locally in Ocean City, Maryland, or perhaps a sex worker at a nearby truck stop. Yet, these possibilities remained unconfirmed, as no one from the community came forward to identify her, either publicly or privately. This lack of witnesses made it unlikely that her identity was entirely unknown to residents. A more troubling theory claimed that a police officer from Blairstown was involved in her death, which could explain why the case remained unresolved for so long. Nonetheless, no credible evidence supported this claim, and retired law enforcement officials who still followed the case dismiss it as unfounded. Another possibility was that Princess Doe was targeted by a serial killer active in the region, such as John Cly, Henry Lee Lucas, or Joel Rifkin. Despite awareness of these suspects, investigators found no credible links connecting them to her case. Similarly, some speculated she might have been an out-of-state teenager working at a local camp, but this theory was never substantiated. The most prominent and persistent theory for many years involved a man named Arthur Kinlaw. For a long time, this was considered the leading suspect, as many details aligned with the case. This theory was even explored on the website of America's Most Wanted, and several articles published in New York Newsday around 1999 and 2000 referenced Kinlaw's potential involvement. At that time, Kinlaw was already incarcerated for other crimes, making it impossible to definitively link him to Princess Doe's death without concrete proof. In a significant development, Princess Doe's remains were exhumed in November of 2020 using a federal grant. During this process, DNA was extracted from her remains for genetic analysis. By May of 2021, investigators had been notified by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children about the possibility of obtaining DNA markers from the degraded samples in collaboration with Astria Forensics. On June 18th of 2021, Astria Forensics agreed to extract DNA and create a genetic profile. By February 10th of 2022, they confirmed that the DNA profile had been successfully generated. The results were then sent to a genealogist from Innovative Forensics Investigations, led by Jennifer Moore, who offered to perform extensive genealogy testing free of charge. On February 22nd of 2022, Innovative Forensics announced they had identified a potential candidate for Princess Doe. Investigators traveled to West Battle, New York, where they met Robert Allenack Jr., Princess Doe's brother. They also collected a DNA sample from her sister, which was used to build a mitochondrial DNA profile, bringing new hope to solving this decades-old mystery. The forensic laboratory of Union County's prosecutor's office collaborated with DNA experts to develop a profile from the sample of the victim's sister. Using advanced mitochondrial and STR-DNA typing techniques, they sent their findings to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification on April 29, 2022. The center successfully identified the victim as Donna Locke, a revelation announced on July 15, 2022, marking the 40th anniversary of her discovery. Robert Allenack Jr. explained that his sister left their home at their mother's request and was never seen again. Back in 1999, new evidence emerged suggesting that Arthur and Donna Kinlaw might have been involved in Princess Doe's disappearance. Donna was later detained in California for attempting welfare fraud under the alias Ilana, a name traced to a Long Island native. During questioning, she provided details about Linda's murder, which led to the arrest of the Kinlaws. Donna also disclosed that Arthur had committed 2 additional murders of unidentified women who remain unnamed to this day. When faced with the possibility of a death sentence, Donna claimed that Arthur had also killed another woman, a sex worker, in 1982. She recounted being present at a cemetery when Arthur allegedly committed the act, witnessing him kill the woman. Another report indicated that Donna said her husband had brought home a teenage girl, who then left and was later disposed of by him. She claimed that Arthur had cleaned his vehicle and discarded his clothing afterward. He reportedly threatened Donna, saying that if she did not attend her job, he would harm her as he had the girl. However, due to limited cooperation, authorities could not charge Arthur Kinlaw. Lieutenant Stephen Spears, who worked on the case for Warren County's prosecutor's office before retiring, stated that Kinlaw admitted responsibility for the girl's death but lacked physical evidence to confirm it. Without knowing Princess Doe's identity, connecting Arthur to her whereabouts remained impossible, and Spears expressed skepticism about the confession, noting that the Kinlaws could not provide a name for the victim, despite claiming to have been with her for some time. Although Spears doubted the credibility of their statements, he believed Princess Doe was unlikely to have been a native of Long Island, New York. Donna Kinlaw was interviewed by a forensic artist who created a sketch resembling the most recent composite image of the girl she claimed to have met. Arthur Kinlaw remained incarcerated for 2 counts of second-degree murder following the investigation into Princess Doe. Later, he was reconsidered as a suspect in Don Allec's case and ultimately charged with her murder. Born on August 5, 1964, Don Alec was a high school junior at Cat High School in Bohemia, New York, where she lived with her mother before her disappearance. According to authorities, a young woman was forced to leave her family home, with her brother claiming she was expelled by her mother. Tragically, she was later found deceased in a cemetery, her true identity remaining a mystery. For over 20 years, the name of her suspected killer was known, yet her case stayed unresolved. In 1999, Donna Kinlaw, wife of Arthur Kinlaw, who was already serving time for multiple convictions related to the murders of several women on Long Island, linked her husband to her death. She recounted that during the summer of 1982, her husband brought home an approximately 18-year-old girl. She told both the police and the press that he had left with her that evening but returned alone, visibly shaken. About 2 weeks later, Donna read in the news that authorities in Badier, New Jersey, had discovered a body matching the description of the girl in their house that night. Her husband repeatedly asked, "What does it say? Does it say who the person was?" Donna remembered that the police had named the victim Princess Jane Doe. Soon after, investigators exhumed the body to recover a femur bone, hoping DNA analysis would reveal her identity. Authorities later confirmed that Arthur Kinlaw had confessed in written statements dating back to 2005, admitting to the New Jersey murder. It was only in April of this year that the girl was definitively identified as Donna Ouellette. Now aged 68, Arthur Kinlaw is incarcerated in Sullivan County, New York, serving sentences for 2 other first-degree murders from 2000. Among his victims was a teenager known only as Linda, whom he described as having been strangled with his hands in April of 1984 in the Bronx. Kinlaw also admitted to hitting her with a bat. He has been formally charged with homicide based on witness testimonies and his own confessions. It is believed that after Ouellette refused his demands to enter the sex trade, Kinlaw drove her to Blairstown, New Jersey, where he murdered her in Cedar Ridge Cemetery. Neither Ouellette nor Kinlaw had any prior connection to that town. Currently, Kinlaw remains imprisoned at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York. Authorities are now working to piece together Ouellette's movements leading up to her death. The DNA Doe Project, a nonprofit organization founded in 2017 by Colleen Fitzpatrick and Margaret Press, plays a crucial role in such investigations. Using forensic genealogy, Volunteers from the group have successfully identified numerous unidentified victims of accidents, homicides, and other unusual circumstances, including individuals who used aliases or were otherwise unrecognized. Their efforts continue to shed light on cold cases, bringing closure to families and solving mysteries that have remained unsolved for decades. The mystery surrounding Princess Doe has marked a significant milestone in the field of genealogical DNA analysis, demonstrating how even the smallest details can lead to groundbreaking discoveries. In her case, a tiny molar root weighing only 200 grams held the key to answers that had eluded investigators for nearly 4 decades. In 2021, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children submitted Princess Doe's molar and eyelash to Estria Forensics for DNA extraction, aiming to uncover her identity. Austria's unique capability to retrieve usable DNA from degraded or otherwise compromised samples set them apart. As Carol Schweitzer, a forensic supervisor at NCMEC, explained, Austria's advanced techniques often succeed where others cannot, making them the ideal choice for such delicate cases. Kelly Kincaid, CEO of Austria Forensics, shared that they were fortunate to find the sample's DNA was exceptionally well preserved. This allowed scientists to gather millions of fragments of human DNA, ultimately enabling the reconstruction of her entire genome. With this extensive sequencing, they obtained hundreds of millions of unique DNA segments, which facilitated the creation of a comprehensive genetic profile. This profile included detailed information about her genetic makeup, allowing Estria Forensics to produce genotype files for NCMEC and the Warren County Prosecutor's Office. These files became the foundation for building a family tree through investigative genetic genealogy, a technique that was impossible just a few decades ago. The collaborative efforts of multiple agencies made this breakthrough possible. Jennifer Moore, CEO of IFI, emphasized that their team's diverse expertise was crucial in uncovering the truth. As Moore noted, the technological advances now available have transformed seemingly unsolvable cases into solvable mysteries. During a recent press conference, Prosecutor Pfeiffer highlighted that science and technology had turned the impossible into reality in this case. For the investigators, finding Princess Doe's true identity was deeply personal, and their relentless pursuit of justice never wavered. Her family expressed profound gratitude to everyone involved, with Dawn's cousin sharing heartfelt thanks for the compassion shown by the community of Blairstown, which treated her with dignity and care. Princess Doe's case was historically significant as the first unidentified individual to be registered with the National Crime Information Center, a milestone achieved on June 30th, 1983, under the guidance of FBI Director William Webster. This marked a turning point in efforts to resolve cases involving missing and unidentified persons, a legacy that continues to influence investigations today. Since her initial identification, the remains of the young woman known as Princess Doe have remained a compelling mystery until today. Persistent efforts by law enforcement, fueled by advances in technology and close cooperation with genealogical DNA specialists, have kept the case alive for decades. It was only through this collaborative approach that she was finally recognized as Donna Lach on the 40th anniversary of her discovery. This breakthrough has reignited hope and curiosity. Many wonder what others think about finally solving a case that has haunted many for so long. Some still ponder her story, contemplating alternative theories or details, and are encouraged to share their thoughts. On the early morning of July 7, 1985, 54-year-old Jane Anchor Hilton was found brutally assaulted and stabbed to death in a bedroom at her employer's residence. She had recently moved into that house, seeking refuge from a difficult marriage just the day before. Her body was discovered by 2 housemates and her own daughter, Autumn. The case seemed perplexing from the start, and for 14 years it remained unresolved until 2 detectives reopened it in 1999. A misquote in a news article then led investigators to suspect Ricky Davis, who was eventually tried and convicted despite maintaining his innocence. Unwilling to accept the verdict, Davis sought justice through the legal system, and 15 years later, genetic genealogy testing revealed his innocence and identified the true perpetrator. This breakthrough was made possible by the efforts of the Innocence Project, an organization dedicated to uncovering the truth. Jane was a well-known figure in El Dorado Hills, California, where she contributed as a columnist for the Foothill Times, often covering local social events. She was a devoted mother of 6 children, whom she inspired through her poetry and daily writings. At the time of her death, she was working toward obtaining her real estate license. She had married Archie Hilton in 1984, but by mid-minus adna tisiacha deviat sot vocem desiat piet, their marriage was unraveling. Seeking support, she approached her employer, Will McLean, who owned a sizable home in the area. The household included her daughter Maureen, her grandson Ricky Davis, and his girlfriend, Connie Dahl. On July 6th, Wilma, the house owner, welcomed Jane and her youngest daughter Autumn into her home. By all accounts, it was a bustling household, but tragically, the very first night of this new chapter would turn into the last for Jane, as she was murdered in her sleep at around Tritritzat a.m. At 20, Ricky Davis and his 19-year-old girlfriend, Connie Dahl, returned home after a party to find Autumn lingering outside. She explained she had been out late and was worried her mother might be upset. As they entered the house, an eerie silence greeted them, and they immediately noticed blood in the hallway. Moving cautiously, they reached the first room, which belonged to Ricky's mother, Maureen. There, on the bed, lay the lifeless body of Jane Hilton, bloodied and unresponsive. She had not been breathing. At the time, her boyfriend and her sister had gone on a camping trip, leaving her alone. Ricky and Connie quickly called emergency services, and soon police and paramedics arrived. Jane was declared dead at the scene, having suffered 29 stab wounds, along with signs of beating and a bite on her shoulder. The murder was brutal and seemingly senseless, prompting investigators to begin questioning those close to Jane. Detectives interviewed Archie Hilton, Jane's estranged husband, who provided a solid alibi. Despite their rough patch, Archie insisted their marriage was ongoing and denied any trouble between them. He was cleared of suspicion and the case went cold. Ricky and Connie both reported that they had arrived home in the early hours and found Autumn waiting outside. Inside, they saw the blood-stained hallway and followed the trail to the master bedroom, where Jane's body lay on the bloodied mattress. Authorities initially suspected an intruder, but the case remained unresolved for 14 years. In 1999, the cold case was reopened. Detectives Richard Stracer and Rick Fitzgerald revisited the investigation, reviewing old paperwork. They focused on a news interview with Connie Dahl, who had been Jane's housemate and Ricky's former girlfriend. Connie had described Jane's body as lying in bed in a natural sleeping position, which conflicted with a recorded statement she had made earlier, an audio clip that seemed to suggest Jane was found on the floor. At the time, Connie was serving time in Oregon on unrelated charges. When questioned, she initially stuck to her original account. Over the next 18 months, she was interrogated 4 times, with investigators employing techniques that could lead to false confessions. During this period, Connie was systematically pressured into implicating Ricky Davis and Autumn, the victim's daughter. She was threatened with murder charges if she did not cooperate, but was eventually offered, a lenient sentence of manslaughter, serving only 1 year. Detectives Stracer and Fitzgerald claimed that DNA evidence would be used to identify the perpetrator. However, no such evidence had been tested at that point, and the DNA recovered from the scene remained unexamined. The case, shrouded in confusion and false leads, continued to hang in the balance, awaiting the truth behind Jane Hilton's tragic death. During the investigation, details from the crime scene, such as a distinctive mark on Jane's shoulder, were repeatedly emphasized. Over 4 interviews, seasoned investigators fed Da information they wanted her to accept, gradually breaking her down. As a result, Da began recalling facts about the incident, which she then used to craft a completely different version of the events surrounding Jane's death. In one account, she claimed Autumn was present during the murder and was splattered with blood, while in another she admitted she might have been the one who bit Jane's shoulder. Da's stories consistently shifted to align with the details provided by the authorities, yet she struggled to remember crucial facts, such as the weapon used or its location. She ultimately implicated her ex-boyfriend Davis, suggesting he was the primary perpetrator in Jane Hilton's death. Davis quickly became the main suspect. Following Da's confession, both Ricky Davis and Autumn Ancor were interviewed. Despite their initial stories, detectives falsely told Davis that Ancor had also implicated him, aiming to pressure him into cooperation. Ancor, under threat of being held responsible herself, claimed she had no reason to shield Davis. Despite aggressive interrogation tactics, neither Davis nor Ancor altered their accounts. The police then used Da's confession as the basis for Davis's arrest. Davis was offered a plea deal to testify against himself at trial. His first trial ended in a mistrial, but a second trial in 2005 resulted in a conviction. Da testified, recounting how she struggled with Jane and accidentally bit her shoulder during the altercation. She described hearing screams and pleas as Davis continued the violent assault. Based solely on her testimony, Davis was sentenced to 16 years for second-degree murder, while Da received a lesser manslaughter charge and a 1-year sentence in county jail. Tragically, Da later died from a drug overdose in 2014. Davis, however, maintained his innocence and in 2006 reached out to the Northern California Innocence Project, seeking help to prove his wrongful conviction. Founded in 2001 by Kathleen Rodolphe and Linda Starr, the NCP was created to assist inmates in obtaining DNA testing to establish their innocence. As a nonprofit affiliated with Santa Clara University's School of Law, the organization began working with Davis, whose case was subjected to a comprehensive review through cooperation between the NCP and the local district attorney's office. DNA evidence recovered from the crime scene was subjected to retesting after the conviction, including Hilton's naked gown and biological material found beneath her fingernails. The results uncovered an unidentified male DNA profile, which matched both the biological evidence under Hilton's nails and her gown, indicating a common source. These findings conclusively excluded Davis and Ancor, demonstrating that Dahl's earlier testimony was inconsistent with physical evidence and likely fabricated. Unfortunately, Archie Hilton had already passed away by the time these results emerged, preventing him from benefiting from the new evidence. The DNA profile was entered into the FBI's combined DNA index system, but no matches were found, leaving the case unresolved in that database. While the evidence supported Davis's consistent claims of innocence, legal hurdles remained. The North California Foundation argued that if this DNA evidence had been presented during Davis's trial, the verdict might have been different. However, until January of 2017, California law required that new evidence must definitively prove innocence, a standard considered nearly impossible to meet. In 2015, expert Richard Leo, specializing in false confessions, reviewed Dahl's interrogation transcripts and concluded the detectives had used tactics aimed at pressuring Dahl into adopting a narrative aligning with their preconceived notions about Hilton's murder. Recognizing the need for legal reform, the North California Foundation co-sponsored Senate Bill 1334 in 2016. This legislation allowed wrongfully convicted individuals like Davis to demonstrate that new evidence could likely influence a jury's decision. Attorney Melissa O'Connell filed a petition for a new trial based on the compelling DNA evidence supported by former California State Senator Martha Leno. The bill's passage in January of 2017 aligned California's standards with those of 43 other states. By 2019, Superior Court Judge Kenneth Malachy vacated Davis's 2005 conviction and ordered a new trial. The trial was initially scheduled for fall of that year, but was postponed to April of 2020 due to the defense attorney's health. As DNA testing technology advanced, Davis became the first person in California, and only the second in the United States, to be exonerated through genetic genealogy. This innovative method involves sending crime scene DNA to specialized companies that search extensive databases for potential matches. In February of 2020, DNA evidence linked a suspect to the crime, leading El Dorado County Attorney Vern Pearson to announce that a man named Michael Green was identified as the individual connected to Hilton's murder. Following his arrest, many people in the community spoke publicly about their familiarity with Green, whose involvement was now confirmed through this groundbreaking genetic analysis. a resident of Roseville, California, who graduated from Oakmount High School in 1986, was known as a laid-back, easygoing person with a calm demeanor. One classmate, wishing to remain anonymous, expressed confusion over why Green would travel to El Dorado Hills and commit such a brutal act against a woman. According to reports, Green was just 17 at the time of Hilton's murder. On the night of July 6, 1985, Autumn, the victim's daughter, encountered Green and two friends, Calvin and Stephen, while they hung out at a park. Autumn initially told her mother she was heading to another friend's house for the evening after taking a shower, but instead she returned to the park to join the boys. What transpired next remains speculative. Investigators believe Green broke into the victim's house and was confronted by Jane. During a struggle to escape, Green may have attacked her in a frenzy. After the assault, Jane's body was discovered by Davis D. and Autumn when they returned home. Green had no prior criminal record, either before or after the crime, and appeared to lead a typical life until DNA evidence linked him to the heinous act. The other two boys present, Calvin and Stephen, were located shortly after Green's arrest. Unfortunately, Calvin had passed away some time earlier. Stephen was found and interviewed the day following the arrest, considered a witness rather than a participant. Green was taken into custody on February 11, 2020. Since he was a minor at the time of the murder, he first appeared in juvenile court on February 19th of that year. District Attorney Vern Pearson explained that procedural steps on the juvenile side were necessary before a transfer could be granted. Subsequently, Green was moved to adult court for trial. After waiting 2.5 years, he pleaded no contest on July 29, 2022, relinquishing his right to a jury trial and his opportunity to challenge the plea or its consequences. His sentencing was scheduled for September 27, 2022, before Judge Suzanne Kingsbury. At sentencing, Dr. Elizabeth Kaufman, a professor of psychological science education, was called to shed light on adolescent development. Her research highlighted the evolving emotional and cognitive needs of teenagers, emphasizing that late adolescence allows individuals to distinguish right from wrong, yet they often still struggle with impulse control. The defense presented several witnesses from Green's childhood, some of whom maintained relationships with him into adulthood. When asked if their opinions had changed since learning of his confession, all witnesses expressed shock at his involvement in Hilton's death, underscoring the unexpected nature of his actions. He was often described as cheerful, well-liked, humorous, and caring, words that remained consistent both before and after the tragic event. Following the incident, Green's former wife, Karen Green, reflected on the profound impact of witness testimonies, which revealed the deep scars left on his family. Each of Jane Hilton's children delivered heartfelt victim impact statements, vividly expressing the devastating loss they endured and how it would haunt them forever. Heather Piss McConnell, one of Hilton's daughters, shared her pain, explaining how the question of why this happened would stay with her for life. She described the overwhelming feelings that arose when collecting her mother's belongings from the house where she was taken from them. Her words conveyed a sense of shared grief, emphasizing that they would always carry the memory of a decision made long ago that changed their lives forever. Hilton's son Ian echoed his sister's sentiments, speaking about the uncertainty and recurring nightmares that haunted their family, especially after false accusations pointed blame at his sister Autumn. Overcome with emotion, he concluded with a quiet acknowledgement that no words could ever bring his mother back. Autumn, the last to speak, revealed her own anguish as she recounted the suspicion and intimidation she endured over the years. She recalled the day 2 detectives came to her home, accusing her of involvement, and how they pressed her to confess, even suggesting she had helped move her mother's body. Her account highlighted the emotional toll of these tactics, which she believed could have gone further had she not invoked her right to legal counsel. Later, Deputy District Attorney Jay Linden read a statement representing the family's feelings. He questioned Green's motives, pointing out the brutality of the attack, multiple wounds around Jane Hilton's head and face, including kicks and bites inflicted by Green himself. Linden emphasized that Green's actions had not only ended her life, but also shattered the lives of everyone who loved her. He urged the court to consider Hilton's achievements and her love for her children, reminding everyone of her humanity. During the closing arguments, Green's defense attorney, Margaret Husher, argued that her client was unable to control his actions at the time, claiming he was too young to understand the wrongfulness of his deeds. Her case relied heavily on expert testimony, suggesting that Green's youth and mental state at the time should be taken into account. She appealed for mercy, citing legal standards and court rules, but Judge Kingsbury interrupted, indicating that the court's role was to uphold justice. The court was about to place him on probation, effectively ending any further defense responses. Lyndon expressed his outrage, calling the probation request offensive and a slap to a family that had endured decades of suffering. He pointed out that the individual had already evaded justice for 37 years, and granting probation would only enable him to continue avoiding accountability. Judge Kingsbury acknowledged the complexity of murder cases involving adolescent development and noted that, in her 26 years on the bench, Jane Hilton's case was among the most brutal she had seen. Before delivering her sentence, she asked the family for forgiveness for the trauma they had endured, expressing hope that they would find healing, as their mother would have wished. She then urged Green to utilize all available resources within the California Department of Rehabilitation, emphasizing that his cooperation could influence his parole prospects. In her closing remarks, Kingsbury mentioned hearing from Green's friends about his positive qualities and potential. She noted that he was still young enough to be released and lead a constructive life. Green was sentenced to a term of 15 years to life and remains incarcerated at El Dorado County Jail, with plans for transfer to the Department of Rehabilitation. The court will determine restitution at a later date. Davis was released on February 13, 2020, and planned to celebrate with his family over pizza. His attorney, Melissa O'Connell, stated he was eligible for over $750,000 in state compensation for wrongful conviction. Although this sum was substantial enough to support his reintegration, O'Connell emphasized it could never compensate for the years of freedom he lost. Davis subsequently filed a lawsuit seeking damages of $18 million for the period from May 21, 2002 to his release date. The suit named El Dorado County, former detectives Richard Stracer, Rick Fitzgerald, Bill Wilson, who had since passed away and was being sued through his estate, and Larry Hennig. Pathologist Dr. Robert Anthony was also included in the complaint. According to the Village Life newspaper, Davis was homeless after his release. As of 2022, the lawsuit remained unresolved. In September of that year, California passed Assembly Bill 2644, effective from January 1, 2024. The legislation prohibits law enforcement officers from using threats, physical harm, deception, or psychological manipulation during custodial interrogations of individuals 17 years of age or younger. Despite opposition, District Attorney Van Pearson urged law enforcement agencies to cease employing such intimidation tactics. Pearson reflected that a decade earlier he might have viewed these methods differently, but witnessing their true impact has changed his perspective. There is hope for change, especially after investigations revealed that law enforcement agencies have long relied on deceptive tactics, often presuming guilt and prioritizing confessions over uncovering the full truth. In response, the district attorney is now adopting a new policy within his office, encouraging other prosecutors to follow suit. This initiative aims to prevent wrongful convictions based on coerced or false confessions, such as in the case of Ricky Davis. The El Dorado County District Attorney's Office will now reject cases where the primary evidence is a confession obtained through threats, lies, or psychological pressure during interrogations. These measures are designed to ensure that no individual is ever again convicted solely on the basis of such questionable evidence. Reflecting on past injustices, the DA personally apologized to those affected by the wrongful conviction of Ricky Davis, which stemmed from aggressive tactics used by investigators in the Adna Tisiaka Deviatsot Vosem Desiat Piat murder of Jane Hilton. After 37 years, justice is finally being served, but the scars of that miscarriage remain. The lives of many family members and friends were shattered by mistakes and false accusations. For Jane Hilton's family, the hope is that they can now begin to heal after years of division over their sister's innocence. Ricky Davis, however, can never regain the freedom he lost, nor can Michael Green undo the damage he caused. Green's actions not only destroyed the lives of the victims' loved ones, but also impacted those he touched before and after the crime. What are your thoughts on this case? Did Michael Green deserve his sentence? Does a clean record, aside from the conviction, truly prove his innocence? How could he allow an innocent man to take the blame? And even if Ricky Davis receives compensation, can he ever rebuild his life? Why is justice delayed for so long? In a different scenario, a frantic call reports a robbery at a pawn shop where the caller's parents have been shot. The dispatcher urgently asks for the location, and the caller reveals the suspect is present. As police rush to the scene, they find a brutal attack with no immediate clues. Witnesses come forward, providing crucial details that help uncover the truth behind the assault on the Hawkins family in Danville, Kentucky in 2013. Michael Hawkins Smith, a 35-year-old former priest and pawn shop manager, had taken over the shop due to the owner's health. Known for his honesty and willingness to help, Michael was well liked in the community. His relationship with his wife Angie, whom he adored, was seen as genuine, and their marriage was a source of happiness. When they had children, their bond grew stronger, and Michael's integrity remained evident to everyone around him. The Hawkins Smith family had always been a close-knit and joyful household, their happiness growing alongside their expanding business ventures. Their pawn shop, ABC Gold, along with other enterprises, flourished into a successful family enterprise that drew regular clients, including broker Dan Smith, with whom they often conducted transactions on Fridays. Life appeared idyllic for the Hawkins Smiths until a dark day in 2013 when an unknown individual chose to shatter their peace. That day began like any other until a frantic call to emergency services reported a robbery at the pawn shop. The caller, trembling, explained that someone was inside threatening the store and that her parents had been shot. The dispatcher urgently requested details, and the caller revealed that the suspect was present, armed, and had already fired shots. As she hid in the back of the store, she begged for help, fearing for her parents' lives. Within 6 minutes, police arrived at the scene. Upon entering, officers immediately noticed a trail of blood leading to Michael Hawkins Smith, the young owner. Moments later, they discovered his wife, Angie, aged 38, and on the other side of the counter, the third victim, 60-year-old broker Dan Smith. All three had suffered gunshot wounds to the head and torso. The officers soon found Andrew Hawkins Smith, just 9 years old, and his 14-month-old sister, Naomi, hiding in a closet. The scene revealed the unimaginable trauma these children endured, leaving them orphaned in an instant. Crime scene investigators uncovered 14 spent shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with Dan Smith's briefcase and personal belongings. Strikingly, the cash from the register and all valuables remained untouched, indicating that robbery was not the primary motive. The absence of surveillance cameras in the shop complicated the investigation, forcing authorities to seek witnesses. A nearby employee from Rainbowy Cleaners described a silver minivan parked near the shop that morning, driven by a large man with a thick beard. While some investigators canvassed the area, others informed the victims' relatives of the tragedy. Michael's parents struggled to accept that someone could wish harm upon their children, yet they sought solace in the fact that their grandchildren had survived. Their grief was profound, yet they tried to find any silver lining amid the tragedy. Meanwhile, news of the incident reached Dan Smith's daughter. Known for his expertise in precious metals and his ability to connect with diverse clients, Dan often handled large sums of cash, sometimes exceeding hundreds of thousands of dollars. This detail led police to suspect that he might have been the primary target. Tracking his recent movements revealed that before visiting ABC Gold, Dan had stopped at Lawson's jewelry store in Harburg, located 10 miles northeast of Danville. The store was equipped with a surveillance camera, positioned to record everyone entering and leaving, offering hope that footage might reveal if someone had been following him. This complex case continued to unfold as investigators pieced together the clues, determined to uncover the motive behind the tragic attack and bring the perpetrator to justice. At 8 in the morning, the store was empty except for the employee behind the counter, who greeted a woman with a friendly smile before heading to the back of the shop. Later, security footage showed Dan Smith emerging from the rear, exchanging a few words with an elderly woman who had just entered, then quickly leaving. It was a typical day at the jewelry store, and the external cameras revealed no signs of trouble. Law enforcement watched helplessly, unaware that Dan Smith would soon become involved in a tragic incident. Meanwhile, 9-year-old Andrew Hawkins Smith was brought to the police station to share his account. He explained that he was at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith arrived carrying a bag of money. During their conversation, a stranger entered and demanded the bag. Dan Smith immediately handed over his briefcase, after which the stranger shot him. Andrew's father asked the attacker to stop, but he was also shot with a pistol similar to one Andrew played with. The boy's mother instructed Andrew to take his younger sister, Naomi, to the back of the store and hide in a closet. Andrew grabbed Naomi and hit her, and it was then that the assailant aimed his weapon at Angie. Andrew couldn't identify the man or his motives, but he believed money was the reason behind the attack. He described the stranger as very tall, with a blonde beard that looked fake, matching a witness account from Rainbow Cleaners. To pursue all leads, police focused on the store's ownership. They discovered that the ABC Gold, Games, and More pawn shop was owned by Steve Dina. Although he usually dealt with Dan Smith on Fridays, he was absent on the morning of September 20th, the day of the incident. Dine explained he had an allergy that morning and canceled his appointments, a story confirmed by his wife. Additionally, his absence was supported by the lack of a silver minivan in his possession, which helped rule him out as a suspect. Dine also clarified why the shop's security cameras were not operational. They had been removed by the previous owner, Kenneth Allen Keith, who had sold the pawn shop due to a brain cancer diagnosis. Keith, like his late friend, Michael Hawkins Smith, was a priest. He sold the shop but kept ownership of another similar business, Gold Rush Buyers in Pulaski County, near Danville's Boone County. Michael's family shared that he often prayed for his friend's recovery, and their friendship, which began at a youth church camp, lasted 15 years. The Hawkins-Smith family held Pastor Keith in high regard, and for Andrew, he was like a beloved uncle. With no clear leads, investigators turned to nearby surveillance systems. They located a camera on the office building of Danville Rentals, a real estate agency, which captured footage of a silver minivan at 8 o'clock that morning. Early in the morning, around 45 minutes past 6, authorities encountered a challenge. The vehicle's license plate and make remained indistinct due to a blurry image. Consequently, law enforcement depended heavily on witness testimony from Rainbow Cleaners, which described the car as an older model with a notably boxy shape. The footage clearly displayed a vehicle with a square rear bumper matching this description, and its color, type, and overall form strongly suggested it was the suspect's car. The search for surveillance footage extended outward from the pawn shop, gradually covering a wider area. By 8:17 in the morning, a camera at Ephraim McDowell Hospital captured the same vehicle, enabling investigators to confirm it was a silver Dodge minivan. In the aftermath, Michael and Angel, along with their family, organized a candlelight vigil to honor their loved one. Hundreds of compassionate individuals gathered that evening, reflecting the profound love and support for those they had lost. Similarly, the family of Dan Smith, like the Hawkins family, was devastated by the tragedy. Despite their grief, they refused to let anger dominate their feelings and participated fully in the funeral rites, seeking solace and unity. The Danville Police Department appealed to the community for any information regarding the suspect or his vehicle. Shortly after, on the 24th of September, they received a call from Pastor Tracy Harrell of Warren, Michigan. He claimed to be a friend of Kenneth Keith and mentioned that during their last conversation, they discussed the recent incident in Danville. During that call, Keith appeared to be affected, expressing guilt over the events. He explained that he was en route to Danville that day to pick up medication for his wife and admitted to feeling remorseful, as he had previously given Michael Hawkins Smith the opportunity to acquire his former business. Keith proposed a theory that Dan Smith might have been the primary target of the attack. He noted that Dan frequently visited him on Sundays to pawn gold, often carrying large sums of cash. This pattern, Keith suggested, could have made Dan a target, especially if someone had tracked his movements. However, further investigation revealed complexities. It turned out that the pastor's relationship with the Hawkins family was not as straightforward as initially believed. These revelations cast suspicion on Keith, prompting authorities to consider him a potential suspect. To verify his alibi, investigators reviewed surveillance footage from the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where the pastor claimed to have purchased medicine for his wife at 9 o'clock. Early in the morning, a man entered the pharmacy, identified as Pastor Kenneth Allen Keith. However, he bore no resemblance to the individual responsible for the recent triple attack. He was not dressed in a green jacket nor sporting a beard, which were distinctive features of the suspect. Despite this, such differences did not entirely exclude his potential involvement. A 7-minute interval separated Andrew Hawkins Smith's call to the authorities and the pastor's arrival at the pharmacy. Investigators examined whether it was feasible to travel from the crime scene to the pharmacy within that time frame. They determined the journey took approximately 5 minutes, making it possible for the suspect to commit the murders, quickly get into a vehicle, and arrive at the pharmacy to establish a plausible alibi. A crucial piece of evidence was that Pastor Keith owned a silver DVE TCH Vosim Dodge minivan, which was not officially registered. However, all the evidence collected was circumstantial, insufficient for an arrest. To gather more information, detectives enlisted Tracy Harrell to participate in a series of simulated phone calls targeting the suspect. Fortunately, Tracy agreed, and during these exchanges, Pastor Keith inadvertently revealed his true sentiments towards the Hawkins Smith family. He discussed details of the case that had not been made public, raising suspicion. Following this, Pastor Keith explained that he had left Danville and returned to Somerset. He then took his vehicle to a car wash to prepare for an upcoming family vacation. At 10:50 in the morning, he was captured on security footage walking down a corridor toward the cashier's counter, visibly smiling, which suggested he was not involved in the earlier incident. External camera footage from the parking lot confirmed that Pastor Kenneth left the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11 o'clock, further supporting his alibi. In 27 surveillance images collected from various security cameras across Danville, authorities gathered enough evidence to arrest the suspect. He was offered a polygraph test to clarify his potential involvement in the pawn shop incident, but his response was unusual. Keith claimed he would not pass the test, explaining that during his military service he had been tasked with eliminating 3 individuals. Investigators obtained a warrant to search Kenneth Allen Keith's pawn shop, uncovering a fake beard and a substantial amount of cash. The officers could not find a plausible explanation for how he had acquired most of the money. Among the items found were bundles of bills wrapped with ribbons bearing the name of the issuing bank, indicating Dan Smith as the client. Further scrutiny revealed that the cash had recently been withdrawn from the account of a deceased broker. Additionally, several .22 caliber casings were discovered in Keith's shop. Ballistics analysis confirmed these shells were fired from the same weapon used in the shooting of young Andrew's parents and Naomi. Based on this evidence, Kenneth Allen Keith faced charges of multiple counts of deliberate homicide and first-degree robbery. It emerged that Pastor Keith believed Michael Hawkins Smith and Steve Dine had conspired to oust him from their business. Knowing that Dan Smith carried large sums of money, Keith planned his revenge. On the day of their scheduled meeting at the pawn shop, he aimed to mislead law enforcement by suggesting the crime was motivated solely by robbery. In reality, Michael Smith and Steve Dine had no involvement in any conspiracy against Keith. During the investigation, no evidence of misconduct by Smith or Dean was uncovered. On September 20th, Keith arrived in Danville in his silver Dodge Caravan. He circled the pawn shop before noticing Dan Smith's car parked nearby. The first victim was the broker himself, followed by Michael and then Angela Hawkins Smith. After the attack, Keith took all the cash from Dan Smith's case, calmly leaving the scene. To bolster his alibi, he stopped at the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where surveillance footage captured his presence. His decision to visit a car wash was another attempt to erase any traces or evidence left on his vehicle. In 2017, just before his trial, Kenneth Allen Keith pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Prior to the trial, investigators obtained medical records from the Veterans Hospital, which revealed that Keith had never suffered from a brain tumor. This raised questions about how someone who appeared so spiritually inclined could commit such a heinous act, and how he could live with the knowledge of his actions. These events took place in 2007 in the state of Kansas. 16 years have passed since the unresolved case of 19-year-old Jod Sanderholm, who vanished on January 5th, 2007. Living with her parents in Arkansas City, Jod had attended a dance rehearsal at her college that day, but she never returned home or answered her phone, behavior that was highly unusual for her. Concerned, her parents promptly filed a missing persons report, fearing for her safety. Jod Sanderholm was born on September 26, 1987, to Brian and Cindy Sanderholm. As the third of three children, having a brother named Jason and a sister named Jennifer, she was known for her dedication and talents. From a young age, Jod loved dancing, which became a central part of her life, yet she also prioritized her education. She was among the top students in her graduating class, earning the title of valedictorian, and received numerous honors, including membership in the National Honor Society, Kansas State Scholar, and Kansas Board of Regents Scholar. Her academic achievements were complemented by her recognition as the Outstanding Physics Student of the Year, awarded by David Steiny. During high school, she was a dedicated member and captain of the Ark City High School dance team for 2 years, and later became an instructor at Ark City Dance and the Universal Dance Association. After high school, Jod enrolled at CI College, where she studied pre-pharmacy. She continued her passion for dance as a member of the college's Tigerette Dance Line. In the town of Arkansas City, with a population of roughly 12,000, many residents believed it was a safe place to raise children. However, the details that emerged after Jod's disappearance revealed a darker reality, exposing that safety was an illusion and that danger could lurk even in familiar surroundings. On the morning of her disappearance, Jod drove her Dodge Stratus to college for a scheduled dance rehearsal, which was supposed to conclude at 10:45. Afterward, she planned to return home. Her mother, Cindy, called her multiple times that day, but Jod did not answer, which was unlike her. She always kept in touch, and if she missed a call, she would return it promptly. Sensing something was wrong, Cindy decided to leave work early and check on her daughter. Upon arriving home, she immediately noticed Jod's car was missing, deepening her anxiety, as she knew her daughter should have been back by then. Inside the house, Cindy found no sign of Jod. Her dance uniform, which she had put in the washing machine after rehearsal, was nowhere to be seen, nor was it in the laundry hamper. The shower stall was dry, indicating Jod had not showered after her dance class, which she usually did. It soon became apparent that Jod had not contacted her father or sister either. She had an appointment scheduled for noon that she never attended. Her parents began calling her friends, hoping to locate her, but none of her acquaintances had seen her after the rehearsal or that evening. The college dance team was scheduled to perform at a basketball game that night, with Jod as the choreographer, and she would not have missed it voluntarily. Yet, she was nowhere to be found, and her absence remained a haunting mystery. Unable to determine anything about her whereabouts, Cindy and Brian, concerned for their daughter's safety, decided to act without waiting for her return. They contacted the local authorities, who promptly began an investigation. Officers distributed flyers with Jod's description and last known location, while also issuing an all-points bulletin for the vehicle she was believed to be traveling in. From Cindy and Brian, the police learned that Jod had been dating a high school friend named Colby Wilson. When contacted by phone, Colby stated he had been visiting his brother in Texas for several days, allowing investigators to rule him out as a suspect. The following day, January 6th, proved to be particularly significant. Lori Leglayer, Jod's close friend with whom she had shared a passion for dance since high school, provided crucial information. Both had enrolled at CI College where they studied dance. Lori recounted that she left her job at Sirloin Stockade in Arkansas City around 10 in the evening on Tuesday, January 2nd. On her way home, she noticed a light blue car passing the restaurant multiple times. As she drove, she realized the same vehicle was following her, which she found unsettling. To confirm her suspicion, Lori began turning onto different streets, and the car behind her mirrored her movements, heightening her anxiety. She then drove to the police station and parked nearby, hoping the stalker would leave her alone. When she saw no sign of the vehicle, she returned home but later saw the blue car again in the parking lot near the station. She hesitated before sitting in her car for a while, unsure whether to drive home or seek help. Lori explained she didn't go into the station, dismissing the incident as a prank, but the situation remained concerning. On Friday, January 5th, the college's Tigerette dance team was rehearsing. Lori and Jod arrived around the same time, parking close to each other as usual. Lori noticed the same light blue vehicle once more and recognized the driver, 23-year-old Justin Thurber, a local resident. Although Lori didn't know him personally, she had seen him several times in the company of his older brother and friends. After practice, Lori and Jod planned to meet up later, but Jod never appeared. Soon other dance team members reported seeing Justin in the college parking lot during the past week, always sitting in his car and watching. Within the first 24 hours of Jod's disappearance, police scoured the city, searching for her vehicle. Given the surrounding fields and wooded areas, aerial searches with fixed-wing aircraft were conducted, as a car's size made it more difficult to conceal than a person. Despite these efforts, her car remained elusive, leaving authorities determined to locate it and uncover her whereabouts. To determine Jodi Sanderholm's whereabouts from the air, investigators traced her last known cell phone signal to a tower near the Sea Wildlife Area, a sprawling forested region along the Arkansas River. At this stage, only one individual, Justin Eugene Thurber, was considered a potential suspect, based on information from Lori later and others involved in the case. Despite his youth, Thurber had a troubling criminal history. 3 years prior, in 2004, he faced charges for illegal possession of controlled substances and received a suspended sentence, being released after 3 months. Subsequently, he was arrested for theft and violations of probation. In October 2005, Thurber was charged with disorderly conduct, and 3 months later he faced petty theft and possession charges again. Just days before Jodi's disappearance on December 31st, 2006, he was arrested once more for theft. After posting a $3,000 bail, he was released, seemingly celebrating New Year's Eve. The following day, January 1st, Thurber impersonated a police officer, causing public disturbances. When authorities responded, he claimed chest pain and was hospitalized, but the reasons why he was not detained afterward remain unclear. Some speculate that a relative working for the local police may have influenced this leniency, though this remains unconfirmed. On January 6th, a police officer spotted Thurber's light blue Cadillac parked outside his parents' home. When questioned, Thurber's father invited the officer inside. Thurber explained that the previous day he had driven to Winfield, a town about 13 miles from Arkansas City. He claimed he met with a friend and 2 acquaintances whom he did not know well, and they drove around the countryside in a car belonging to one of his friends. According to Thurber, their vehicle became stuck on a dirt road near Seville, after which he walked toward Arkansas City, roughly 30 miles away. He said he was tired after walking for 6 hours and called his father to pick him up. His father confirmed this account, saying he found Thurber wet and dirty a few miles from CI State Fishing Lake. Thurber also told police that his car, left in Winfield, had been returned by friends. His story was unconvincing, but at that moment, there was no basis for charging him. Later that evening, officers spoke with Alexis Schwartzel, who had recently ended a 3-year relationship with Thurber. She told them he often took her to the Sea Wildlife Area southeast of Arkansas City, describing places they frequently visited together. The police informed Alexis that they were investigating the disappearance of Jod Sanderholm. She was taken aback and recalled that Justin had once mentioned he started watching Jod when she was 13, secretly peering at her while she swam in her backyard pool and sometimes peeking through her bedroom window in the evenings, waiting for her to change clothes. When asked about her breakup with Thurber, Alexis explained she ended their relationship because he was increasingly abusive and exhibited strange behaviors. She recounted that during intimacy, he would sometimes choke her unconscious, and he had also asked her to fight him because he couldn't become aroused otherwise. As the investigation progressed, it became increasingly evident to the police that Justin Thurber might be connected to Jod's disappearance. Although no concrete evidence directly linked him, Thurber was detained late on January 6th for violating bail conditions and for suspicion of criminal trespass after officers found him on the college campus where he was not supposed to be. Thurber claimed he wanted to speak with his lawyer. Meanwhile, police executed a search warrant at Justin's parents' house, collecting his shoes, wet and drying on a towel, and clothes he had worn the previous day, which had been washed by the time they arrived. On January 7th, specially trained search teams began combing the rugged terrain of the CI wildlife area. They uncovered shoe prints matching Thurber's and several smaller footprints. As darkness fell, they decided to resume the search the following day. On their way home, some investigators stopped at Sea County State Fishing Lake after hearing Thurber had been wet when his father picked him up. They discovered muddy tire tracks, footprints near a public restroom, and items such as a pair of cut-off sweatshorts, Jod's driver's license and social security card, her black leotard, a jacket with her name on the front, a vehicle floor mat, and a car seat cushion. The sandal found at the scene matched the impressions at the wildlife area. The search extended over the next 2 days around the lake and wildlife area. On January 9th, sonar specialists examined the lake bottom and located a sunken vehicle. Tragically, that same day, the family's hopes were dashed when Jod's body was recovered from the water, confirming the worst. Authorities investigating the disappearance of Jodi Sanderholm uncovered crucial evidence hidden beneath a pile of leaves, twigs, and logs at the sea wildlife area. Among the findings was DNA evidence linking Justin Thurber to both Jodi's vehicle and her remains. The car had been submerged in the lake for over 3 days, leading investigators to believe that water intrusion might have obliterated any potential forensic clues. However, forensic experts dedicated extensive hours to examining the vehicle, ultimately discovering a short strand of hair inside. Mitochondrial DNA testing conducted by Carrie Melton, director of the Forensic DNA Laboratory, revealed that this hair was almost certainly Thurber's. Additionally, Barbara Lee, an employee of a private DNA analysis firm, tested samples taken from Jodi's right biceps and the right side of her chest. Her findings indicated that Thurber could not be excluded as a participant in the events, with a 99% probability that he was involved. Further evidence came from cell tower data, which showed that on the day Jodi disappeared, her phone and Thurber's phone were in the same locations at the same times. Lori Leiter, Jodi's best friend, confirmed seeing Thurber in the college parking lot on that day. When police reviewed security footage from the college, they found Lori's account to be accurate. The footage depicted Thurber in the parking lot during rehearsal hours, leaving at the same time as Jodi and following her in his light blue Cadillac. Investigators also found letters addressed to Jodi's parents near the lake, suggesting Thurber had tracked her from the college to her home. When Jodi stepped outside to retrieve her mail, Thurber allegedly attacked her, forcing her into her own vehicle and driving away. The theory was supported by the discovery of a shoe print matching Thurber's sneakers near the Sanderholm family mailbox. Footprints of Thurber's shoes, along with smaller impressions consistent with Jodi's footwear, were also found at the sea wildlife area. The footprints at the preserve told a compelling story. Jodi's tracks were interrupted, while Thurber's footprints led deep into the woods, indicating he had carried her further on his own. Both sets of footprints were located near the site where her body was eventually found. The investigation revealed that Thurber's account of being with 3 other individuals on the day of Jodi's disappearance was false, as those persons denied seeing him that day. This contradicted his claim that his car was stuck near Cedar Vale, a story he later failed to substantiate when asked to show the location. Thurber was taken to Cedar Vale by officers to locate the spot he had mentioned, but he was unable to identify the exact place. At the police station, Thurber volunteered to undergo a polygraph examination and requested that his relative, Chad Monroe, who worked for the county sheriff's office, be present during the process. During the investigation, the evidence presented was deemed sufficient to charge Justin Thurber. He denied any involvement, but the judge set his bail at $1 million. Thurber's defense team argued that he was mentally unfit and lacked the capacity to stand trial, yet they failed to convince the court. Despite having completed high school and attending college for a period, the judge found no credible basis for claims of mental incapacity, especially after a medical examiner testified during the trial. The examiner described the autopsy findings, noting that the victim's final hours were extremely distressing, with her entire face and body marked by bruises and abrasions and signs of strangulation clearly visible on her neck. Strangulation was identified as the cause of death. While not all cases of violence are as severe as Thurber's, the details of this incident at the Sea Wildlife Area reveal a disturbing motivation rooted in desire. Thurber used a stick to commit the act. During the trial, in addition to Thurber's former girlfriend, 6 other women testified, each claiming that he had stalked them. One of these women, a co-worker, recounted how she had to call police for assistance after Thurber waited for her in the parking lot after work, having left a rose and a note under her windshield wiper expressing his interest in her. Witnesses also reported seeing Jody Sanderholm's vehicle on January 5, 2007. Carrie Morris, a friend of Jody, noticed her sitting in the passenger seat as their cars passed in Arkansas City around midday. She described the driver as a large man and tried to call Jody's cell phone, but received no response. Additionally, 2 other women observed a vehicle resembling Jody's on a dirt road south of Arkansas City around 3 p.m., further indicating her presence in that area before her disappearance. In February of 2009, a witness identified Thurber as the driver involved in the case, and the jury unanimously found him guilty on all charges. Recognizing the severity of the verdict, Thurber's legal team attempted to negotiate a plea deal, offering to plead guilty if the prosecution would forego the death penalty. However, the family of the victim opposed such an arrangement. The presiding judge, considering the jury's decision, ultimately sentenced Thurber to death by means of lethal injection in March of that year. The following year, in 2008, Kansas enacted the JOD Act, a law that broadens law enforcement powers concerning stalking suspects and expands the range of behaviors that can be classified as stalking. Despite the sentence, Thurber has continued to pursue appeals, with his attorneys arguing that he may have mental health issues that could influence his case. In 2018, the Kansas Supreme Court delayed Thurber's execution, citing a ruling by the United States Supreme Court which declared that executing individuals with even mild developmental disabilities is unconstitutional. Jody's mother, Cindy Sanderholm, attended the original trial and emphasized that a competency hearing had been held, during which Thurber was deemed fully capable. She expressed her disgust, revealing that Thurber had written letters to other girls while in prison, which she interpreted as evidence of his mental fitness. "That's sick," she remarked. "It shows he's aware enough to reach out and communicate, to know what he's doing." She also recounted that Jody had pleaded for her life and that Thurber had denied her that second chance. In August of 2021, the Kansas Supreme Court announced that a state law passed in 2020 permits Thurber, who is still appealing his sentence, to seek appointment of legal counsel for post-conviction DNA testing. This means that even after 16 years since Jody Sanderholm's death, the case remains unresolved. It's noteworthy that Kansas has not carried out any executions since reinstating the death penalty in 1994, and the last execution in the state occurred in 1965. Since then, 9 others have been sentenced to capital punishment, but no one has been executed. A spokesperson for the Kansas Department of Corrections explained that there is no current timetable for future executions, describing the situation as somewhat surprising given the law's long-standing existence. Jody's older sister, Jennifer Aldridge, expressed her disappointment, noting that she expected discussions about the death penalty to have taken place decades ago. She pointed out that even if Thurber's sentence is upheld, it's likely that it will never be carried out, given the state's history and the lack of recent executions. Justin Thurber remains confined within the maximum security El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas. According to a 2014 report by the Kansas Legislative Post-Audit Committee, each inmate held in administrative segregation at El Dorado costs nearly $49,000 annually. Beyond the expenses of incarceration, taxpayers also shoulder the hefty price of prosecuting cases involving the death penalty, approximately 4 times more than cases where the death penalty is not pursued, amounting to around $395,000 per case compared to $100,000. This financial burden adds insult to injury for families awaiting justice, especially in tragic cases like that of their loved ones. For Jody's parents, the pain is compounded by the ongoing legal process. Her father, Brian Sanderholm, expressed his anguish, stating that it hurts every week when he sees his paycheck and realizes a portion funds the upkeep of the inmate responsible for his daughter's suffering. His wife, Cindy Sanderholm, echoed his sentiments, emphasizing that she believes justice would be served if the law were applied correctly. She pointed out that if it had been their child or anyone else's, they would want the appropriate legal measures taken. Sadly, Cindy Sanderholm passed away on December 2nd, 2022, at the age of 63, leaving her family to grapple with their grief. Turning to another tragic case, the story of Sheila Labar illustrates how early psychological and physical trauma can shape a person's destiny. While trauma does not inevitably lead to cruelty, some individuals, influenced by genetic and psychophysical factors, develop into cold-blooded offenders. Renowned criminal psychologist Adrian Raine explores this in his book Anatomy of Violence *, citing numerous serial offenders whose harrowing childhoods hint at a complex interplay between environment and biology. Sheila Labar, born in 1958 on the 4th of July in the small Alabama town of Fort Payne, exemplifies this tragic trajectory. The youngest of 3 children, she was raised on a farm amid cornfields in a quiet rural setting. Her older sister Lynn recalls Sheila as an inquisitive, lively girl with a creative spirit who enjoyed being the center of attention. She possessed a charming appearance and a pleasant voice, leading one to believe she might have pursued a career in entertainment under different circumstances. Instead, her name became associated with heinous crimes, overshadowing her childhood innocence. Despite the court's conviction for only 2 murders, criminologists believe Sheila Labar was responsible for many more. Her case prompts us to question whether she was inherently a monster or if her brutal acts were the result of the cruelty she endured during childhood. The story reveals the profound cruelty inflicted by her father, Manuel Bailey, who led their family through years of suffering caused by his alcohol dependence. It would be more precise to say that his entire household endured his destructive habits. Manuel would often spiral into violent rages, transforming into a fierce, uncontrollable figure who took pleasure in tormenting his wife and children. He insulted, humiliated, and physically assaulted them with whatever was at hand, frequently throwing family members out into the cold night or freezing weather, then locking himself inside, refusing any entry. As a result, mothers and children often had to spend nights outdoors, either in a barn or under the open sky. One day, during yet another drunken outburst, Manuel began hurling dishes and objects at his family. His wife tried to shield the children, but a flower pot struck her youngest daughter, Sheila, on the head. She sustained a serious concussion and a permanent scar on her temple, which she carefully concealed with her hair. Yet, the physical injuries and insults were not the worst part of their suffering. According to Sheila and Lynn, their father also subjected them to forced intimacy from an early age. Their mother might have been aware but never addressed the issue openly. Despite the chaos at home, Sheila excelled academically and dreamed of escaping the farm to pursue a life in the city. She was ambitious and eager to realize her childhood aspirations of becoming an actress or a singer. She possessed natural charisma, a striking appearance, and a beautiful voice, all of which fueled her determination. At the age of 18, she left her parents' home, but adult life proved challenging. She lacked the grades to enter university and didn't have enough money to move to a big city. Instead, she found work as a maid in a hotel where her older sister was already employed. Sheila's slender figure, striking blue eyes, charming smile, and thick, long hair drew attention from men, and she quickly learned to use her attractiveness to her advantage. In the late 1970s, she met a man named Jonathan Baxter, and they began a romantic relationship. Jonathan was under 20 at the time, but already had a young daughter from a previous relationship. Their connection soon led to marriage, but the union lasted only a few months. Jonathan discovered that Sheila had been abusive toward his child when he was away at work. She would sometimes raise her hand or lock the girl in a closet if she cried or misbehaved. Without confrontation or explanation, Jonathan filed for divorce and ended their relationship. After her divorce, Sheila kept her belongings outside her house, determined never to see or hear from her former spouse again. In the years that followed, she dated various men, mostly relying on them financially, but these relationships were brief, lasting only from a few weeks to a couple of months. In the early 80s, she met her future second husband, Ronnie Jennings. Their passionate and tumultuous romance quickly led to marriage, and she adopted the double surname Bailey Jennings. Their relationship was marked by frequent conflicts, infidelity, and intense arguments, yet they remained together for over 3 years. In 1984, after yet another heated disagreement, Sheila demanded a divorce, but Ronnie refused. It became clear that Ronnie's intentions were less about reconciliation and more about provoking her. His actions pushed Sheila into a state of hysteria. She took a large quantity of pills and drank strong alcohol in front of him. That night behind the wheel, while under the influence, she lost consciousness, veered off the road, and crashed into a tree at high speed. Miraculously surviving, she sustained severe head injuries, spending more than a week in a coma, with doctors offering no prognosis. When she finally regained consciousness and began to recover, Sheila was transferred to a psychiatric hospital, where she remained for several months. During this time, she confided to her sister that an orderly had been persistently harassing her, possibly exploiting her vulnerable state while she was heavily sedated. After her release, Sheila returned to her second husband's home, but soon began to behave aggressively and threateningly. During a violent altercation, she attacked Ronnie, stabbing him in the chest with nail scissors. Fearing for his safety, Ronnie filed for divorce and quickly moved out. Following the dissolution of her second marriage, Sheila sought new companionship through personal ads in newspapers. She placed her own advertisements but found that no man stayed with her for long. Her tendency to dominate and control her partners, both in intimacy and daily life, drove them away. One day, a photo of an attractive young woman in the dating section caught the eye of Wilfred Bill Lebar, a 60-year-old man. Wilfred had been married twice before, with adult children and grandchildren from previous marriages. Widowed several years earlier, he lived alone on a large country ranch. A successful chiropractor in Epping, New Hampshire, Wilfred also raised horses on his estate. Despite his wealth and stability, he felt lonely and longed for a strong, confident woman. Sheila, drawn by his affluence, saw this as an ideal match. She began to send him heartfelt letters, hoping to capture his interest and secure her place in his life. In the summer of 1987, she successfully captivated her elderly companion by sharing revealing photographs, which led to an invitation from Lebar to visit his ranch. Their romance blossomed quickly, and the older man, eager to impress, showered her with costly gifts. Soon she moved in with him, a development that boosted her confidence and social standing. Despite their close companionship, Lebar had no intentions of formalizing their relationship through marriage. Yet she, eager to solidify her position, changed her name and began calling herself Lebar, a move that surprised her partner but did not meet his opposition. As time passed, Sheila started to dominate aspects of Lebar's life, meddling in his business affairs and managing his property. Meanwhile, age began to take its toll on Lebar's vitality, making intimacy increasingly difficult. According to Sheila, she was permitted to meet other men, often bringing them directly into their home. One of her frequent lovers, a Jamaican named Wayne Enos, was initially hired as a ranch worker, but soon moved into the household with Lebar's tacit approval, likely under Sheila's influence. By 1995, Sheila and Wayne had formalized their relationship, and she considered him her sole partner. However, Wayne soon discovered that Sheila continued to see other men, which led to conflicts. One day, Wayne confronted Sheila and her other lover physically, causing injuries. Used to asserting control, Sheila struggled to handle her third partner's aggressive outbursts, which often turned violent whenever rivals appeared. This tumultuous dynamic culminated in her filing for divorce and seeking legal protection against Wayne's assaults. Despite the separation, Sheila's personal life remained chaotic, marked by numerous affairs and frequent disputes. Her relationships often ended in legal battles with accusations of cruelty and threats to the well-being of her partners. She even deliberately harmed some, once striking a boyfriend with a vehicle and nearly causing a severe injury, while others bore scars from her aggressive actions. As she aged, Sheila's behavior grew increasingly dangerous and unpredictable. She demanded unwavering obedience from her lovers, and any disobedience would trigger her rage. In 2000, at the age of 74, Labar passed away from heart failure. Although medical examiners and law enforcement found no evidence of foul play, his family suspected Sheila's involvement. They believed she had been gradually poisoning him for years, pushing him toward the brink of death. Despite never having been officially married, Labar's will named Sheila as the sole beneficiary of his estate, making her the primary heir of all his possessions. Relatives once attempted to challenge the estate through legal channels, but their efforts proved futile. They remained convinced that the mistress had coerced Bill into drafting a will favoring her, leaving her in full control of his assets after his passing. As previously mentioned, all of Bill's property fell entirely into Sheila's hands, freeing her from any external influence or oversight. She then transformed her residence into a realm of allure and indulgence, a place she described as a sanctuary of seduction, where inhibitions vanished. On the streets, in bars, and online, Sheila sought out men, enticing them to her ranch with promises of extraordinary pleasure, regardless of their age, appearance, or background. Her goal was to keep her visitors as long as possible, exerting control over them. She showed no concern for their physical traits, only offering fleeting moments of ecstasy before attempting to dominate and subjugate them to her will. She frequently tried to seduce couriers by meeting them nude and offering alternative forms of payment, but she underestimated her own aging and waning attractiveness. As a result, many couriers refused to return, and neighbors observed that various men would visit the ranch, some leaving the same day, others staying briefly. What transpired inside the house remained a mystery, and the whereabouts of Michael DeLorge, in particular, was unknown. Soon, Sheila began seeking lovers among men desperate for shelter, money, or suffering from addiction, those most vulnerable and easiest to manipulate. She exploited her status as a widowed millionaire, boasting about her inherited wealth. In 2004, she encountered a homeless man named Michael DeLorge on a city street. He was in dire straits, having lost everything due to drug addiction. His family had tried to send him to rehab, but he ran away and drifted aimlessly afterwards. Sheila took an immediate liking to Michael and invited him to her ranch, promising shelter, food, and drugs in exchange for intimacy. Completely dependent on her, Michael complied out of fear of returning to the streets. Sheila's desires grew increasingly twisted. She would humiliate, beat, and manipulate him, taking pleasure in his suffering. Despite multiple attempts to escape, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, Michael never reported her, fearing disbelief from authorities. Sheila, however, tracked him down each time, bringing him back to her ranch. Desperate, Michael tried to contact his family, warning them of his predicament. His loved ones responded swiftly, but by October of 2005, Michael vanished without a trace. When his family reached out directly, Sheila claimed they had broken up, leaving the true fate of Michael uncertain and the mystery of his disappearance unresolved. Sheila had disappeared without a trace, and her current location remained a mystery to her loved ones. Michael had not been seen at any of his usual spots, and those who knew him had no information about his whereabouts. Efforts to reach out to him through authorities proved futile, as his whereabouts remained beyond suspicion. Meanwhile, Labar's trustworthiness was questionable, and Sheila's wealth was greatly exaggerated. Her house and car required constant upkeep, forcing her to find employment. Naturally, she chose a job that suited her talents, operating a call service that relied on her captivating voice. Men, captivated by her charm, often offered to meet her in person, among them a young man named Kenny County. At the time of their acquaintance, Kenny was barely 24, handsome, kind-hearted, and open, but his low intelligence made him highly impressionable. He was very close to his mother, depending heavily on her, but Sheila, through clever manipulation, gradually severed this bond. She lured Kenny into her world with promises of love and a future together, making their night of intimacy unforgettable. Convinced he had found his soulmate, Kenny shared his happiness with relatives and soon moved into Sheila's house. However, Sheila's true nature soon revealed itself. She transformed her home into a nightmare, creating a brutal confinement room. Every encounter turned into violence, with Kenny suffering from bruises, cuts, burns, and abrasions. Despite his injuries, he was unable to escape Sheila's control, as she kept him isolated from his loved ones. His family could only guess at his suffering, as Sheila prevented him from communicating with them. Concerned neighbors, noticing his increasingly frail and battered appearance, eventually raised alarms. A few days before his disappearance, a store clerk captured a photo of Kenny on her phone. The image showed a severely emaciated young man with large bruises under his eyes and on his cheeks, and a nose that appeared broken, indicating multiple injuries inflicted over time. His shopping cart contained 2 large fuel cans, which later investigations revealed were intended for his own cremation. The store employees, disturbed by his appearance and the suspicious items, reported him to the police, fearing domestic abuse. Yet, Sheila managed to evade consequences and no charges were filed. Eventually, Kenny ceased all contact with his family. When his worried mother visited Labar's house, the owner responded aggressively, refusing to cooperate and suggesting she leave. Kenny's family repeatedly urged him to stay away from Sheila, but each attempt to intervene ended in failure. Eventually, they reported him missing, suspecting he might be held against his will at a remote ranch owned by Sheila. When police arrived at her residence, she claimed Kenny no longer lived there, asserting he had run away after his mother, whom he allegedly feared, began visiting frequently. Sheila provided an audio recording in which she questions her lover if his mother had assaulted him, and he quietly confirms. The situation seemed increasingly bizarre. The following day, an officer securing a search warrant discovered disturbing evidence on the estate. Sheila had been on law enforcement's radar before, linked to another mysterious disappearance, yet she had never been questioned, nor had her property been searched until now. When authorities arrived, Kenny was nowhere to be found, but they noticed several strange fires near outbuildings. These fires burned with improvised materials, mattresses, wooden fragments, hay, all soaked in a flammable liquid. One of the bonfires contained bones that appeared to be human remains. The police called in forensic experts to analyze the scene, but what they uncovered was even more shocking. Widespread traces of blood, poorly washed and covering much of the house, suggested a violent event of mass proportions. The blood belonged to at least 3 individuals, and the bones in the fire matched Kenny's. Nearby, 2 empty fuel cans, purchased by the boy just the day before, were found. Further investigation revealed the remains of Michael, a man who had vanished years earlier, along with some unidentified fingers. Numerous items belonging to various men were recovered from the ranch's sump, their fates still unknown. Sheila was not at home during the police visit. She had anticipated trouble and fled, hitchhiking to Boston in an apparent attempt to vanish. Along the way, she seduced a driver who trusted her enough to invite her into his home. However, the next day, after seeing her on television as a suspect, the driver contacted authorities, revealing she was now in his residence. Sheila was subsequently arrested. During a search of her property, authorities discovered a box of videotapes. On these tapes, Kenny, Michael, and several other men appeared to confess to horrific crimes. Yet, judging by their appearance and condition, it was clear these confessions were made under duress or coercion, raising questions about the true circumstances behind these disturbing revelations. Since Sheila's arrest, her mental health has become a subject of intense concern and scrutiny. The court ordered comprehensive evaluations, which revealed she suffered from a delusional disorder alongside signs of schizophrenia. She believed herself to be an angel sent from heaven, tasked with protecting children from predators. Her deteriorating mental state was central to her defense, as her lawyer argued she was profoundly ill and not fully aware of her actions. This mental instability was attributed to severe trauma she endured during childhood. Sheila claimed that a tragic accident years earlier left her in a coma, where she purportedly encountered God. According to her, this divine being instructed her to rid the world of men who harmed children. During the trial, her former husbands and lovers testified against her, describing her as unstable, violent, and unpredictable. Wayne Annis, her third spouse, stated that she had repeatedly urged him to kill her ex-husband to seize his property. Despite her lawyer's efforts to portray her as mentally unwell and in need of treatment, the court found her conscious of her actions at the time of the offenses. In July of 2008, Sheila was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. All her appeals were dismissed, and she now serves her sentence at the Homestead Correctional Facility in Florida. Meanwhile, a man exited a house abruptly, slamming the door behind him with force. He paused in the driveway, running his hand through his messy black hair, visibly agitated. Muttering quietly, he then returned quickly to the house. Gripping a baseball bat from the entrance, he moved through the rooms with a commanding presence, shouting loudly. As he approached, a young woman with blonde hair emerged, but he struck her on the head with the bat. She collapsed, unconscious, a pool of blood spreading around her. The man continued to strike her until his fury subsided, leaving a scene of violence that is hard to imagine in such a peaceful place as New Zealand. This island nation is renowned for its stunning natural landscapes, unique flora and fauna, and a climate that fosters a comfortable lifestyle. Its residents enjoy a high standard of living, characterized by a calm and measured way of life, with little corruption and almost no crime. Yet even here, tragedy can strike unexpectedly, disrupting the idyllic tranquility and challenging perceptions of a perfect society. Our story also touches on Harmon and Brad, who met on an ordinary day that would change their lives forever. Harmon Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her father passed away when she was only 10, leaving a heavy burden of grief that shaped her early years. After her family relocated to relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom, a place far from her homeland, the long-awaited tranquility never materialized. Eventually they returned to South Africa, but peace remained elusive. Harmon, who was over 18 at the time, chose to stay with her relatives and later moved to London. There, she completed her education, earning a master's degree in marketing. Known for her strong-willed and playful nature, she naturally drew people's attention and admiration. Loyal and dependable, she became a trusted friend to many. Living in a bustling metropolis demanded significant financial resources, forcing Harmon to work diligently to maintain a comfortable lifestyle. During the day, she was employed as a marketer in a retail store, while her evenings were spent working part-time at a gentleman's club. Despite the unconventional choice of employment, she adhered to strict personal standards, never engaging in behavior she considered inappropriate or undignified. Her professionalism earned her the respect of high-profile clients. It was at this venue that she met an intriguing and charismatic man named Brad Callahan. Born in New Zealand in April of 1978, Brad's early childhood was marked by his parents' separation when he was 9. Afterward, he lived with his mother before relocating to Australia. In 2001, Brad graduated from university with an engineering degree specializing in construction. His skills led him to the United Kingdom, where he was appointed chief structural engineer for a major development project, enhancing his reputation and social standing. Seeking further opportunities, Brad approached a gentleman's agency, ultimately choosing Harmon for his personal connection. Tall, intelligent, with dark hair and striking eyes, he was a man driven by ambition and a busy career, leaving little room for a traditional relationship. Nonetheless, after a successful business dinner, he was captivated by Harmon's radiant personality. Their initial contact blossomed into frequent informal communication, which gradually deepened into friendship and then love. Their relationship progressed swiftly, and soon they began living together, sharing a life rooted in mutual trust and care. They supported each other sincerely and appeared genuinely happy. When Harmon became pregnant, Brad decided that returning to New Zealand, an environment with cleaner air and a more relaxed pace, would be best for their growing family. In March of 2005, they moved to Auckland, where their son Jack was born. From the very first days, Harmon and Brad dedicated themselves to ensuring Jack's safety and happiness, making him the center of their world. However, the arrival of their child introduced new challenges. Disagreements arose over how to raise Jack, leading to tension and instability in their relationship. Over the course of 3 years, these conflicts intensified, ultimately resulting in their separation. Following their separation, Carmen and Brad shared joint custody of their child Jack, though the breakup was emotionally taxing for both. Despite the difficulties, they genuinely aimed to maintain a respectful relationship for the child's well-being, with Jack often surrounded by family and support. Carmen and Jack moved in with Colin, her half-brother, living nearby in Auckland, allowing her to gradually regain emotional stability and start anew without Brad. In 2008, Carmen relocated to a house on a street adjacent to Brad's, intending to keep Jack close to his father. As someone who lost her own father early in life, Carmen deeply wished for her son to always have a father present, despite their separation. Many friends and family believed Carmen and Brad still maintained a friendly connection, but their interactions were primarily limited to matters concerning Jack's best interests. Meanwhile, Brad continued his career as a construction engineer and, in May of 2009, entered a new relationship, even becoming engaged. Carmen was focused on raising Jack and resumed working at a gentleman's club, a decision that deeply hurt Brad. He believed that the mother of his child should avoid involvement in questionable work, and this disagreement strained their relationship. Over time, tensions escalated. Carmen issued ultimatums that Brad often ignored. Despite their differences, Brad remarried and was preparing to become a father again, which increased his financial responsibilities, including the alimony payments stipulated in their agreement for Jack's support. These financial strains contributed to a series of conflicts. On the 19th of March 2010, neighbors called the police following an incident of domestic disturbance. Officers responded to a quarrel where Carmen assaulted Brad, resulting in her receiving a warning. Their relationship continued to deteriorate, with arguments persisting even when they were apart. Disputes over Jack's schooling and custody became increasingly hostile, leading to a cascade of unresolved conflicts and scandals. On the 29th of June, Brad visited Carmen's home to draft a new support agreement and discuss Jack's education. Carmen was dissatisfied with the document, and during a heated confrontation, she expelled Brad from the house, shouting that Jack was not his son. 2 weeks later, Brad attempted to reconnect with Carmen, but she refused to respond. On the 13th of July 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police. Investigators began searching for her, reviewing security footage and interviewing neighbors to piece together the events leading to her disappearance, uncovering crucial details to aid their search. On June 29th, a surveillance camera captured Carmen at a nearby supermarket while she was inspecting her rented home, where she lived with Jack. The footage revealed her near the house, prompting police to investigate further. Inside, they found signs of a struggle, blood stains on the front door, the washing machine near the sink, and in the shower. Forensic experts use luminol, a chemical that reacts with iron and blood, to detect traces invisible to the naked eye. Multiple glowing patterns confirmed the presence of blood on the bathroom door and the floor, indicating violence had occurred. The property's landlady recounted hearing loud screams followed by distressed crying and moaning. That day, she knocked on Carmen's door but received no response. Peering through a window, she noticed a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, typically made of wood or metal, used for hanging clothes. Alarmed, she called her husband. While waiting, she saw Brad exit Carmen's house carrying soiled clothes. He hurriedly explained that Carmen had fallen ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. The landlady observed that Brad appeared freshly showered, which seemed consistent with his story. Trusting his account, she chose not to involve authorities at that moment. The investigation intensified when Carmen's mobile phone drew attention. Authorities noted that messages were being sent regularly, but their tone and manner differed from her usual communication style. These exchanges continued until July 10th, raising questions about her whereabouts and health. The police didn't have to search long for answers. Carmen's car was eventually located, with her luggage, clothes, and personal belongings inside. Examination of the seized suitcase revealed traces of blood on some items. A note was also found, indicating she owed money to her employer's agency. In the glove compartment, an envelope addressed to Misty contained $270. Detective Mark Benefield, upon discovering blood traces in Carmen's vehicle, considered the possibility that she might have been harmed. A search was conducted in the countryside southeast of Auckland, near downtown, where her car had been seen around the time she disappeared. However, the effort to locate her body proved inconclusive. As the investigation progressed, authorities examined both Carmen's and Brad's phones. They discovered that both devices had been in close proximity throughout the search, yet Carmen's phone had not connected to the cell tower in Hamilton, suggesting she might have been elsewhere or deliberately avoided tracking. This evidence became crucial in unraveling the case as investigators pieced together the timeline and movements, aiming to determine Carmen's fate and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. The fate of the missing trash can remained uncertain. Whether it was the same container that had vanished from its usual spot near the house, or if it had been observed by a neighbor through her window on the day Carmen disappeared. The police did not dismiss the possibility that the trash can might have been brought inside the house, yet they did not confirm this either. Their focus shifted to a more troubling scenario as they re-examined Brad's phone activity and financial records, uncovering his recent purchases. On June 30th, Brad had arranged to meet with Cleaver, acquiring a large plastic container and several garbage bags. Scrutinizing Brad's daily routine, investigators uncovered anomalies that did not align with his usual behavior. For instance, on one workday, Brad arrived at the construction site unusually early and wandered alone around the property for an extended period. While peculiar, this was not enough to arouse suspicion among the workers, who only noted his presence as that of a supervisor. However, combined with evidence such as Carmen's missing phone and suspicious purchases, the picture shifted. The authorities began to see Brad not as a victim, but as a suspect. They theorized that he had assaulted Carmen by striking her multiple times and then carefully concealed her remains. On the 21st of September, Brad Callahan was taken into custody on charges of her murder and efforts to obstruct justice. He entered a plea of not guilty and was awaiting trial. Coincidentally, during his detention, Brad's second son, born to a new partner, arrived, stirring a mixture of hope and bitterness within him. After 9 days in custody, overwhelmed by emotion, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's burial site. He believed he had devised a flawless plan to make it seem as though Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. Confident in his scheme, he thought he had succeeded. However, life's unpredictable course forced him to adapt. Under intense questioning, Brad recounted the events of that tragic day. Following a heated argument, Carmen had thrown him out of the house, shouting that Jack was not his son. Minutes later, Brad returned and struck her in the head with a baseball bat, rendering her unconscious instantly. Blood spattered across the floor as she collapsed. Heavy breathing filled the room as Brad stood over her, eyes wild with remorse. Realizing he had committed an irreversible act, his anger and resentment surged. In a fit of rage, he delivered several more blows. Despite knowing the gravity of his actions, he was unable to stop, consumed by a destructive obsession. Memories of happier times flashed through Brad's mind, moments now lost forever, highlighting the profound change that one tragic act had wrought in his life. Though he understood that nothing could undo what had happened, he felt no remorse. Instead, he believed that his actions had finally resolved the chaos that had haunted him, bringing a twisted sense of closure amid the darkness. His primary concern, and Jack's as well, was that he had finally regained his composure. After taking a shower, Brad quietly left Carmen's house, determined to cover his tracks. In the days that followed, he took deliberate steps to dispose of Carmen's remains and conceal his involvement. He contacted a friend, arranging to meet him outside a supermarket, where he asked him to purchase 3 black garbage bags, a bottle of kerosene, and cleaning supplies. Brad waited nearby, hoping to avoid drawing suspicion. Once his accomplice arrived, he returned to his apartment, meticulously cleaning the space by wiping away bloodstains and debris. He then wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, placing it into a trash container for disposal. Over the next few days, Brad dismembered Carmen's body into 8 parts to make disposal easier. He severed her legs from her torso at the hips, then cut each leg through the knees into 2 segments. Her arms and head were also detached from her torso. On July 3rd, he met a close friend at a boat ramp near downtown Oakland, confessing that he had killed Carmen during an argument and needed help to get rid of the remains. When he attempted to dump the body parts into the water, his plan failed because his friend refused to provide a boat. Subsequently, Brad drove to Wur Ridge in West Auckland, where he buried the remains in a shallow grave. A few days later, on July 7th, he took Carmen's car to Hamilton and left it in a hotel parking lot. Inside, he placed a suitcase of clothes and several bags containing her personal belongings, creating the illusion that she intended to leave. However, in his haste, he overlooked the fact that the suitcase also held bloody clothing. After abandoning the vehicle, Brad began sending text messages from Carmen's phone, pretending she was still alive. He told her friends she was unwell and had been in poor condition for days. His plan unraveled on October 1st, when police excavated the site Brad had indicated and uncovered Carmen's remains. They were found in plastic containers carefully removed from a makeshift grave on White Air Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen had died from multiple blows to the head, with a fractured skull being the fatal injury. Following extensive forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family for a private funeral on October 13th. The service was held at Green Lane Christian Center, honoring a young woman known for her kindness, cheerfulness, and success. Her son, little Jack, who had long hoped to see and embrace his mother, was only able to kiss her white casket. On February 8th of the following year, the first court hearing took place. Judge Wenning determined that the crime was committed unintentionally, considering Brad's explanation that his actions stemmed from an emotional outburst. The judge acknowledged that the killing occurred in a moment of rage, but was less forgiving regarding the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was formally charged with attempting to obstruct justice. The police case summary indicates that at 8:45 a.m., authorities. On July 29, 2010, Callahan attacked Mrs. Thomas, striking her multiple times in the head, which resulted in her death. Following the assault, he messaged a friend, requesting 3 garbage bags and a bottle of kerosene. Over the subsequent days, Callahan dismembered Mrs. Thomas's body into 8 parts, preparing them for disposal. Nearly a year and a half later, on November 25, 2011, a retrial took place in Auckland's High Court. The courtroom was filled with police officers and members of the public, including Mrs. Thomas's family and friends. Unexpectedly, Bradford Callahan, who had previously denied any involvement, pleaded guilty to the charges. His sudden admission aimed to influence the course of justice, which the judge described as one of the most serious attempts to obstruct legal proceedings he had seen. The judge acknowledged that while the murder of Carmen Thomas was particularly brutal, it did not warrant the harshest penalties available under the law. Callahan, age 33, was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder and an additional 6 years for attempting to interfere with justice. These sentences are to be served concurrently. The judge also condemned the extent of Callahan's efforts to conceal his crime, emphasizing the gravity of his actions. The court noted that the minimum sentence for obstructing justice was inadequate to fully address Callahan's misconduct. Supporters of Callahan left the courtroom without comment. Meanwhile, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing grief, stating that nothing could undo their loss. However, they appreciated that Callahan would remain incarcerated for a long time, giving him time to reflect on the harm he caused. Carmen Thomas's mother, Teresa Scott, delivered a heartfelt victim impact statement describing how she felt utterly shattered by her daughter's death. Detective Inspector Mark Benefield, who led the investigation, explained that the case was the result of hundreds of hours of police work over the past 10 weeks since Carmen was reported missing on July 13, 2010. He detailed how early in the investigation, authorities concluded that Carmen was likely murdered, prompting meticulous evidence gathering and research, all conducted within legal boundaries. Benefield also mentioned ongoing efforts to investigate the construction site on Victoria Street, which might yield further evidence to support the case. Despite challenges, the police remained committed to uncovering all relevant facts, ensuring justice for Carmen Thomas. Until now, we have refrained from commenting on media reports regarding our activities at the facility as we remain cautious about potential legal issues in court proceedings, explained Mark Benefield. He did not dismiss the possibility of additional arrests or charges related to Carmen's death in the near future. Brad Callahan demonstrated courage by accepting responsibility for his actions in this tragic case, pleading guilty to 2 charges. However, this does not diminish the pain caused. Carmen's loved ones are devastated, their world shattered as they face each new day without her. Her family members feel utterly broken, unable to find solace. Carmen's mother, Teresa Scott, expressed that she could forgive someone under certain circumstances if they had taken a life, but she could never forgive this man for disassembling her daughter's body and concealing it in containers. Her stepfather, Wayne Callahan, and his attorney, Stuart Grieve, stated that Wayne acted responsibly and does not plan to pursue legal motions. Considering that New Zealand records only about 50 homicides annually, any crime that deviates from the norm tends to attract extensive media coverage, including court proceedings. It's possible that bias against the victim influenced the trial, perhaps due to her line of work. Yet, even if Carmen had provoked Brad or caused him anger, we do not blame her for losing her life. If Brad had sought sole custody of their child, he might have exploited prejudices about Carmen's occupation to his advantage, but instead, he chose violence, ending her life and attempting to conceal his actions. In discussing this tragic story, we are not diagnosing but merely reflecting on the circumstances. The recurring question is understandable. In a moment of uncontrollable rage, a person might commit irreversible acts. But what feelings could a mentally healthy individual have when planning to dismember someone they once loved deeply? Currently, little Jack Callahan is living in another town under a false name, in the temporary care of his grandmother. He remains unaware that his father was responsible for his mother's death, and it is crucial that he never finds out, as the truth is not his burden to bear.